Good evening and welcome to the November 13th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Lori, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Here.
Ms. Newell? Here. Ms. Saleh?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Here.
Both Mr. Hart and Ms. Graham are out of the country or out of the state this evening, so it'll be the five of us. Okay, there are documents before us this evening. Is there a motion on the floor with respect to the documents?
Move to accept into the record.
In a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Lori, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Saleh?
Yes.
Ms. Newell? Yes. Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you. Very good, and welcome to the Planning and Zoning meeting. We have some new faces with us here this evening, some that we've seen before, but I want to take just a moment to explain a little bit how tonight's proceedings will go. There is only one case on our agenda, so that should make our lives significantly easier. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming. It is a privilege to be able to serve in a community whose residents are as passionate about their community as you all have demonstrated this evening. I want to talk a little bit about the order of events. We will initially hear from our staff. Thank you. We'll give a presentation. Then the applicant will be invited to step forward and make any other comments that they would like to make with respect to the presentation that had been given. And then we will take public comment. I've got a sheet here that has 10 names on it, people that would like to speak. If you were unable to sign up on this, that will not preclude you from being able to speak, but I will hear these 10 names first and then take anyone else who wishes to let us hear your thoughts. We will stay as long as we need to because we want to hear everything that anyone in the community has to say. Want to lay down a little bit of the ground rules. We are so privileged to live in a democracy, and this is democracy at its finest this evening. We will treat everyone with the utmost respect. We will not make comments or any other type of noise while an individual is speaking. Everyone will have their turn. We will treat one another with the utmost respect in realizing that our democracy isn't free. It falls on a great week, a Veterans Week. We've all been so amply reminded that freedom isn't free. So we will be respectful of one another this evening. Also, when it comes time for public comment, we have received 45 letters from members of the community. We have all read them. They've been made part of the public record. And as we go through that time, I would ask that we keep our comments to new information or information that hasn't already been stated. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I will introduce our first case. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to City Council when rezoning of property is under consideration. In such cases, as with the applicant tonight, City Council will receive recommendations from the Commission and conduct another public hearing to approve or disapprove the rezoning. All adjacent property owners will be notified of that public hearing. Planning staff will provide an overview of the application process as part of their presentation in the case this evening. We only have one item on our agenda, so the order is very simple. The first case we will hear this evening is case number 14-068. It is a rezoning preliminary development plan preliminary plat. The following application is a request for a rezoning of approximately 160 acres from R Rural District and R1 Restricted Suburban Residential District to PUD Planned Unit Development District for the potential development of the site with up to 240 single-family lots and approximately 60 acres of open space. The site is on the west side of Avery Road, north of the intersection with Memorial Drive. Anyone intending to address the Commission on this case, please stand. Raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Anyone intending to address the Commission? So if you're planning on coming to the podium, that means you should be standing. Okay. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this Commission? Very good. Thank you. Claudia is our presenter, so please take it away.
Good evening. Thank you for that introduction, Madam Chair. We also have a couple of staff members that will be part of this presentation, and I will introduce them as we're moving along. Thank you. As you said, I have a quick slide explaining the process of a planned unit development. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed a concept plan in March of 2014 for the Riviera Club proposal, which is the first step in a planned unit development application in establishing a planned district, which essentially means that the request is for a rezoning to a district that is not currently in the zoning code, but will have its own development regulations. At that meeting, as it is typical for concept plan, there was feedback given and public testimony heard, but no votes were taken at that time. We are now in step 2 of the planned unit development process, which is the rezoning with a preliminary development plan and a preliminary plat stage. And that is the first formal step to establish a planned district, which would eventually require a vote from the Planning and Zoning Commission. As I said, the planned unit development district rezoning includes a development text, which includes development regulations that will be applicable to this site from here on out. It also includes a preliminary development plan, which has the site layout, the access, street design, open space locations, pedestrian circulation, as well as a preliminary tree survey and replacement information, and utility plan, as well as the preliminary plat, which comes with phasing information as well. At this stage, the Planning and Zoning Commission provides a recommendation to City Council, as this essentially is a legislative action, and approval by City Council would constitute the rezoning to a planned unit development district. The third steps are then final development plans and final plats, which include all final details for the development, and those usually happen in stages, or they're called sections as well. The site here is outlined in yellow. It is adjacent to 3 Dublin city schools, Dublin Jerome High School there to the southwest, Griselle Middle School and Deer Run Elementary School to the northeast. Adjacent neighborhoods to the south include Belvedere and Shannon Glen, to the north, Tartan West, and then to the east, Muirfield. Here's a little bit of a closer view of the site as it exists today, again outlined in yellow. The blue lines on the slide indicate the county boundaries, and the site actually is within 3 counties, Franklin, Delaware, and Union. It is 167.1 acres. There is some information on the county's website that shows it as 168 acres. It's been surveyed and verified. It's 167.1. It has 2,000 feet of frontage on Avery Road on the east side, and it's been a golf course since the 1970s. There are 2 access points currently on Avery Road that are accessing the parking lot for the clubhouse and banquet facility. And there are streams to the North Fork of the Indian Run running through the site from the northeast to the southwest approximately. Those streams have floodway with them, as well as a stream corridor protection zone. There are tree stands and tree rows scattered throughout the site, and especially along the boundaries. Here is a view of the concept plan that the Commission reviewed in March. It proposed 284 single-family lots at a density of approximately 1.7 units to the acre, with 35% of the site dedicated to open space. Here is a view of the community plan future land use map, which shows the site as parks and open space. This site has been dedicated as parks and open space in the 2007 plan update, which staff did specifically at the request of the ownership of the golf course at that time. The parks and open space designation is described as land used for public or privately owned parks and recreational uses, or lands that are to be preserved in a natural state. This classification may include portions of private lands that have been identified for open space preservation as part of future development projects, but it's not necessarily targeted for public dedication or acquisition. The surrounding densities of the site, shown in this bright yellow color here, is approximately 1.1 to 2 units per acre. Here is a map showing the existing zoning of the site. In the dark green, the zoning is R, which is the rural district, and then in the light yellow is R1, the restricted suburban residential district. Both districts permit single-family lots. Both districts have the same development standards for those single-family lots. They are 40,000 square foot lots with 150-foot lot depth. Also permitted within these districts are agriculture, parks, and public schools. I wanted to quickly address the relationship between the community plan and the zoning code, as it is critical to this application and is commonly misunderstood. The community plan is a statement of policy, while the zoning code is a law. The community plan is a document which states general principles and notes specific issues upon which development in the city is evaluated. The plan itself has no direct legal authority, and its adoption does not regulate or change the use of land. Only a modification to the zoning code can change uses to which the land may be developed or altered in the regulations that affect the site. The community plan essentially reflects the future use of land, while the zoning code affects the use of land today. Here is a map that staff provided during the concept plan review, where as we have done with other infill type of developments, the Commission typically requested that we provide an analysis of how proposed development would fit within the surrounding context in terms of density. We have done this research based on plats that were provided and zoning texts that were provided, especially for the newer developments. And then for Muirfield, we did do a calculation based on picking an area, as you can see outlined there in the teal color, and then counting rooftops based on aerial photography. We came up with a density of 1.27 units per acre, which included also the commercial lands within that area of Muirfield. Here's the proposed preliminary development plan that is before you tonight. The applicant is proposing 240 single-family lots with access of Avery Road as the main access point, and then access also internal to the site from developments to the south at Belvedere. There are 2 access points proposed, which had been planned for during the development of Belvedere. And then also in the northeast, an access point to Tartan West, which also includes a street stop that was planned for at the time of Tartan West development. There are internal street connections, open spaces shown, as well as a stub street there in the western portion of the site, which would eventually allow for access to Highland Croy Road. Sub-area D there in the bottom left on the screen is allocated for open space or a site for a future elementary school, which the Dublin City Schools, in working with staff on keeping apprised of this development, have requested the applicant explore with them. Here is a map of surrounding densities that the applicant has prepared, going in a lot more detail than the staff analysis that we provided. This is part of the application materials that are in your packets. The applicant has essentially, particularly in this Muirfield area, done more detailed analysis for what areas are actually part of Muirfield, as well as what areas are developed as commercial, and then done a housing count as well. And they're coming up with a density of 1.4 units to the acre, which, given the amount of detail they're providing here, is probably more accurate than what staff has provided. Here is a comparison of the densities from the concept plan that the Commission reviewed. As I said, it had proposed 284 lots in March with a density of 1.7 units to the acre. And then we're providing 2 numbers for the density proposed here tonight. One is with the school site taken out, which is approximately 15 acres that may eventually be developed and owned by Dublin City Schools, which at 240 lots would get us a density of 1.58 dwelling units per acre on 152 acres in total, versus if the school site or Reserve D, as it is shown in the development plan, includes the total area of the site at 167 acres for a density of 1.44 units to the acre. Here's a view of the sub-areas that the applicant is proposing. We've color-coded them here for easier view. There are essentially 4 sub-areas proposed. A sub-area in the south of the site is in blue and includes the largest lots, which require an area of 14,000 square feet, a width of 100 feet, a depth of 125, and then front yards and rear yards of 25 feet each. Sub-area B takes up the largest number of lots within the development, and they're requiring an area of just under 10,000 square feet with a width of 75 feet and a depth of 125 as well. Sub-area C in the northwestern portion of the site has been described as a more empty nester type product with less of a maintenance requirement on smaller lots. And you can see those at 6,600 square feet required with a lot width of 55 feet. They're allowing a little bit more lot coverage on those lots. As we said, there's probably more ranch-style homes proposed within this area. And then sub-area D is the open space or school site. If it were to be developed, there are front and rear yards provided. The development requirements that are proposed as part of this proposal are very similar to the surrounding neighborhoods as in terms of lot sizes and setbacks. Then here is a map of the open spaces proposed. The green open spaces shown on this map are all to be owned and maintained by the City of Dublin, and that includes 52 acres. And then in blue, those open spaces are owned and they're maintained by the homeowners association made up of these lots, and that's about 11 acres. There's some discrepancy on the plans regarding this reserve area, which is sub-area D. It is 15 acres. It's not accurately labeled on all of the plans, so we're requesting that the applicant rectify this. We're also having some concerns about views within these open space areas, particularly Reserve H and I and J, and we're requesting that some lots within this area are being removed so that there are vistas created that are more open and dramatic within this area. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve Langworthy, who has some remarks to make regarding conservation design.
Thank you, Claudia. Some questions were raised to us about the applicability and how we were treating this site with respect to the conservation design resolution, which was passed in 2004. Just to give you a little background on that, conservation design actually started with a fellow named Ian McHarg, which I kind of grew up on, as many of us did, I think, in this business with Design with Nature. I'm sure the chair's very familiar with this book as well. It was kind of our Bible for a long time. And then another guy named Randall Arndt. I put 1996 for this. It's actually started in 1980. This book, particular book, was in 1996. Came up with the idea of conservation design principles. When I first got into business, we called them cluster subdivisions, but everybody didn't like the word cluster because it just didn't sound very good. So it changed from cluster subdivisions to open space preservation, because that sounded better, although it was the same thing. And essentially what it meant was that you took areas and set aside natural areas and took them out of development and concentrated all the development within more developable areas upon the site. So the conservation design has been, I think, mistaken from time to time as being a type of subdivision, when in fact it's not really a type of subdivision. It's actually a process to derive a subdivision, to which this name was given. So the process that Randall came up with was to first set up the background, developing what kind of context the site was in, mapping all the features that were there, integrating those features, and then prioritizing them. And to prioritize them, he developed two areas of priority. First, of primary conservation areas of floodplain, slopes, and wetlands, which he considered to be the most important natural feature aspects, particularly as related to development. And then secondary conservation areas, which are, again, listed, I won't read them all, but they're listed on the screen. Those are all considered the secondary parts. Not that they are necessarily any less important, it's just that they tended to have less applicability on all sites, where floodplains, slopes, and wetlands were those areas that were deemed more or less unbuildable. So what he said was then to design these conservation design subdivisions, first of all, you identify the conservation areas, locate the house sites, put the streets and trails in, and draw the lot lines. So it looked a little bit like this. So step one in the green, the dark green, were those areas that would be considered conservation areas, again, based on the previous slide that I had up there with the areas that would be set aside from development. Second stage then would be just locate the house sites, where the house sites should be. You notice there's not even any streets or lot lines here. This is a deliberate step in the process. So the third step then is to, once you got the house sited, was then to put the streets to serve those houses in after that. And then the fourth step was to draw the lot lines as appropriate around those particular lots. So in total, the idea of conservation subdivisions grew out of this desire to look at natural areas and preserve those natural areas as much as possible. For the most part, these sites were considered to be areas that had previously been undeveloped. The only exception to that, and you noticed in the list that I had previously, was farmland. This technique was also used, particularly in the eastern United States, as a farmland preservation method. So what would happen is the development, rather than taking up farmland, would be concentrated elsewhere at the same densities that would be allowed, but concentrated elsewhere where farming activities were not taking place. So we took a look at this site, and we've had a number of subdivisions go through in the past few years, at least since the 8 years I've been here. And this is the first time that conservation design, to my knowledge, has come up at any of these subdivisions. But so we looked at this particular site, and we, early on in the development process, asked the developer to give us maps and give us some indication of where the natural features were on the site and how they were treating them as part of their development. In other words, what we wanted them to do was go through the conservation design process for us. So they did that. They highlighted the natural areas, described where the development areas were going to be, and then built the house sites around that. We thought in the end that they did a pretty good job of staying to the spirit of what the conservation design subdivisions were intended intended to do. So you'll see that I took all the reserve numbers off, but you'll see the green and blue are still reserve areas, the map that Claudia had up there, were the areas that were set aside. The only area that probably wasn't set aside is two were the school site, area D, subarea D, and the area just to the east of that previously had not been set aside, but later iteration they did that. I think it's after the one that you saw. We've also asked developers, part of our review process, to open up some views in here. We thought this was benched down a bit for development, to open up some areas in there and keep some areas a little bit more open in here to keep more of a flow through there. They've also taken into account the stream corridor protection zone in there as well. Since this was previously developed as a golf course, I hadn't been around long enough to know what was there prior to the golf course, although I think we were trying to find some aerial photos that had the site prior to when the golf course was developed. But as a developed site, most of the natural features had been disturbed as part of the golf course. So we were taking whatever those features were left and asking them to kind of design around those features. And ultimately, I think the design they came up with was, if not exactly meeting the resolution of conservation design, at least tried to, number one, mirror the process, and I think came close to getting the same result that we would have gotten, or close to the same result that we would have gotten out of a formal process.
Thank you, Steve. One other plan that is included within the preliminary development plan is a path connection illustration, which shows all of the shared use path and sidewalks that are proposed within the development. In blue are sidewalks or bike paths on all the public streets, and then in red are all the paths that are included within open spaces. And the applicant is proposing to use some of the some of the cart paths that are currently on the site, and we are requesting that there are some additional information provided as to the durability of those, because if they're being dedicated within open spaces and used as shared paths, they have to meet certain standards that the city has for those types of paths. The applicant has also worked with Dublin City Schools to provide paths for walking or biking to the adjacent school sites. There is one proposed in the southern corner there for Jerome High School, and then also one in the northern section to Griselle. And the applicant has indicated that they would be able to finish the path connection completely, since the school's paths don't stub into the site. So they would go onto the school sites and finish those path connections, and the schools seem to be agreeable to that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tina Waskowitz, who is one of our traffic engineers. As you know, all of these applications are a very concerted group effort here, and I wanted to make sure that we had all the experts here tonight.
Thanks, Claudia. Thanks, Commissioners. Just wanted to talk briefly about the traffic study that was submitted for this. And you know, the traffic study for any rezoning process is for us to understand the impacts of the proposed land use on the roadway infrastructure. And it's a tool to help us determine the developer's responsibility for their site access points, as well as their impacts to off-site infrastructure. And this image shows the locations that were studied for the Riviera site. We took a look at these locations basically under today's conditions and a projection in 10 years for the study. With the proposed rezoning, the majority of the site is single-family homes, and then the potential school site that Claudia mentioned would also add trips to the existing infrastructure. And what's not shown is realistically, there would also be some reductions with the existing golf course being converted. Obviously, those trips wouldn't be there anymore, and the site is being contemplated as a replacement for an existing school. So those basically get shifted in the network, and they're not all new trips to the system. One of the things I'd like to point out here is that the ITE trip generation rates were used to develop these, and we do have experience with other developments in Dublin that show us that those are reliable numbers that we can estimate and project from. And the peak hours are really what we concentrate on as far as an analysis point. And the peak hour is literally 1 hour taken out of a 2-hour period of account. So like in the morning, a traffic count will be taken from 7 to 9 a.m. and the peak hour is the highest 1 hour of volume within that 2-hour period. And a benefit of potentially moving the school is then, of course, having this asset inside of a neighborhood and having that relationship with the homes adjacent to that site and keeping some of those strips from getting out onto the roadway networks, such as here, Avery Road, Brand Road, Highland Croy. This is an example of why, from the staff perspective, it's really important to have this site have a main direct connection to Highland Croy Road. It helps distribute the trips in the area. And you can see it helps balance out where those trips go on those residential connections. And this is using the same numbers from the table and just looking at it graphically in the AM peak hour with and without that connection to Highland Croy Road, and it just helps highlight the importance of having that connection and intersection point directly to that roadway in our system. The connection not only helps the points that are highlighted here on the map, but it also helps distribute across the network at intersections like Avery and Brand and the other adjacent neighborhoods, carry fewer trips with this connection in place. So the way that the staff will look at this as far as what the developer is responsible for mitigating from a traffic aspect is that they would need to improve Avery Road at their site drive, which would be a turn lane on Avery Road. Obviously, we're recommending that they make that connection directly to Highland Croy Road and provide any improvements needed at the Highland Croy Road intersection with that site drive. We're also requesting that they would put in a pedestrian crossing on Avery Road. So this would be one of those systems where there's a standard flat sheet sign and then the LED lights blink when a pedestrian comes to that location, and obviously the curb ramps and pavement markings to go along with that. And then the off-site contributions, we would be looking at something similar to what you saw for Avondale Woods, where we would look at the percent of site traffic contributing to any of the intersections that need mitigation, regardless of what triggers that improvement. We would just take that percent site traffic and apply it to the cost estimate for that improvement, and request that the developer agree to that in an infrastructure agreement with City Council. And I think one of these off-site locations that's probably going to get a lot of interest is the intersection of Avery Road and Brand Road. And we wanted to point that out to you tonight, as I'm sure you're aware that the City Council has this intersection included in our capital improvement program. So we are looking at this location regardless of the status of this application before you tonight. And it's been included for design, and then will be, once we evaluate the cost estimate, it'll be programmed for improvements. The current...
Are those current design fees in this 15 CIP or?
The construction money is not programmed yet. What's programmed right now is the preliminary design, and then once we get preliminary design,
Preliminary designs in 15?
It's in 14, actually, so yes.
Thank you.
Be soon. Currently, we're seeing a little more than 10,000 trips per day using this intersection. Site traffic, we anticipate increasing by about 7%. That's assuming the school on the site and assuming the direct connection to Highland Croy Road. Without the direct connection, that increases to about 8%. Right now, the intersection currently operates at a level of service C overall with and without the site traffic. Projecting 10 years out, we do anticipate that the intersection would fail with or without the site traffic. That's where we're coming up with that percent contribution to try to balance those needs and have a fair contribution to that improvement. And just a few other intersections that will be included in an infrastructure agreement are the Post Road and Highland Croy intersection, Jerome Road and McKittrick Road, Highland Croy Road and McKittrick, and Highland Croy and Brand. You want me to turn it over to Erin? And now Erin Stanford's going to talk a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question?
Yeah, could you go back to the slide where it showed the traffic numbers? Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick note. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I'll hand it over to Erin Stanford to talk a little bit about the site utility.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Aaron Stanford. I'm also a civil engineer with the City of Dublin. And I wanted to give you a quick overview of the public utility system associated with this development. First, on this color-coded map, I know it's hard to read. There's a lot going on in this development. But in blue, what you will see is the proposed public water and fire protection utility that we put in with this development. They will gain access to public water by means of the installation of these new public water mains and fire hydrants. And they will connect into existing public water mains at the connection there at Avery Road, right just to the north of the access drive. There's a 16-inch water main there. And also in 3 other locations located at the street stub connection to Tartan West, and then the 2 other southern street connections into Belvedere. We'll connect into existing 8-inch mains in those locations. And with those connections also, there will not be any adverse impact to existing water pressure services. If you remember, a few years ago, we recently completed the Tartan West water tower up in that area that substantially increased water pressure and service in that area. This second utility I'd like to go over is the stormwater and the floodplain management portion of this project. With that, with any rezoning, we have a preliminary stormwater report that's submitted by an engineering consultant. With that, what they have modeled is their storm sewer system that they would propose to install with this development, which would include new public storm sewer mains, which up on the screen is in green. Would also, the stormwater management would be handled by a series of stormwater management ponds. And the second part of that analysis with this project, it was a little unique because it was previously identified as a site that had a stream corridor protection zone on it. And what that means to you and I is it had an existing stream on site that had significant stormwater management carrying capacity that we wanted to maintain for floodwater capacity, and then also had natural features. So in those areas, we've identified corridors that, as Steve mentioned earlier, the intent there is to preserve natural features and the flood carrying capacity of those ditches and streams. So that was also something that the engineering consultant has modeled for us, and what that has resulted in, if you would look on the plat, on the preliminary plat for this development, is a zone that has been proposed, and what that zone would do was set up an area that would be preserved. Those natural areas would be preserved. Would set up a stream corridor protection zone that prohibits areas to be filled. You cannot remove natural vegetation, and it basically helps preserve that flood carrying capacity in that area. So that's the mechanism that we would have. The last utility that we'll go over real quick is the sanitary sewer. And this area, you can see in orange, they would propose to get access to the public sanitary sewer system by the installation of new public sanitary mains. Directly to the south and the western boundaries of the site is an 18-inch trunk sewer that was installed just prior to the development of the Tartan West subdivision just to the north. A few years back, we have identified a downstream capacity issue with the North Fork Indian Run trunk sewer, which is what this development would be tributary to. For that reason, we had also the engineering consultant do a capacity analysis and modeling of the sanitary sewer. So what we had them do was look at the entire sewer shed for this trunk sewer, which was included of a little over 2,000 acres. And what we had them do as a second step was to model the impact to our existing system with any of the undeveloped areas left in that sewer shed, which was roughly 460 acres. What we wanted them to do was to quantify the impact not only of those undeveloped areas, but specifically of this development. So that has been submitted and reviewed. With that, one of the things that they have provided to us are 4 solutions to that. There's a pipe segment that's undersized that we've identified. They've proposed 4 separate solutions to that improvement, given us some cost estimates. So from here, what we'll do with that is somewhat similar to the traffic improvements that we talked about. It will be an improvement that will be identified and included in that infrastructure agreement that would be taken to council, would need to be approved by council. But that's how we would get that, any kind of cost sharing commitment that we would get, and make sure that that improvement would be made in a timely manner. I think that's it. Thank you.
Before you leave, may I ask one question?
Sure.
For the stream corridor protection zones, are the ponds an integral part of that, or could the ponds be reverted back to streams? What
think-
would engineering's,
Depending on how the utility is set up, I think there's flexibility to do either. I think part of that is, and the one thing that we try not to get hung up on is, yes, the stream corridor protection zone has an important stormwater management importance, but the other part of that is a riparian habitat. And what I mean by that is we want to preserve the natural features that give that area places for aquatic habitat and those things to thrive. So that's part of the evaluation also in those areas. Some of these areas, we have some existing ponds that are being reused for stormwater management. They're being increased so that we have that capacity. Some of them in this area, some of the existing ponds have been preserved. And some of that's also, it's an evaluation of the vegetation that's around those areas.
very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erin and Tino. So all of these maps and slides that we showed you thus far are part of the preliminary development plan. And then there is one more piece that is part of the application, which is the proposed preliminary plat, which also includes the phasing information. And there are some infrastructure requirements tied to phasing, particularly, as Tina mentioned, this connection to Highland Quarry Road there on the western portion of the site, which we're requiring to be completed as part of what they're identifying on their plans as Section 5. There is some requirements that we have included in the proposal for the preliminary plat to be fixed before it moves to City Council, and I go through those as I'm coming up to our recommendation. The zoning code includes criteria for approval of the rezoning with preliminary development plan. And in our staff report to you, we have identified and analyzed those in detail. And typically in our presentations, we just summarize them here. We have conditions proposed for most of the criteria. And with that, planning is recommending approval of the proposal with 11 conditions as outlined in the staff report, and I also have them here on the slides. One of the things we wanted to make sure, and the schools have also asked us for that to be quite clear, is that regardless of what happens within subarea D, the site will be impacted by the adjacent schools. There will be noise, there will be activities, particularly the high school is used year-round. So we wanted to make sure that any kind of buyer within this area is aware that this activity takes place. And one of the best ways to do that is include that in the development text as a sort of heads-up type of statement. We also wanted to make sure that the development text gets updated a little bit with the intent of the ownership of subarea D. I'm sure the applicant is going to cover that in their presentation to some extent, but we wanted to make sure it's also memorialized within the development text. Like Steve and I have mentioned, we have some lots identified that we would like removed to create more open space vistas. Also, there are some discrepancy with lot numbering and showing reserves, providing accurate information regarding the sizes. We want that updated in the plans as well as in the text. We also want to make sure that there are a couple of lots proposed that have stream corridor protection zones on them with applicable regulations in the development text as well as on the preliminary plat. Most of those are in rear yard, they're in rear yards, so there wouldn't be any development happening in those areas, but we want to make sure that any kind of stream corridor protection zone on a lot is being preserved, and we're making sure that the owners know of the restrictions, and there are some delineation of those in the field as well. As we've talked about, the Highland Quarry Road connection is very important, not just for the distribution of traffic, as well as connectivity. There are safety concerns as well from the Washington Township Fire Department, so we want to make sure that that connection happens with Section 5. Like Tina said, similar to Avondale Woods, which the commission and city council recently approved, we have proposed a condition for a infrastructure agreement that the applicant needs to enter into between the city and them for contributions. And we also have some details on the traffic study that we need updated and revised prior to city council review of the rezoning application. And then the turn lane there at Avery Road needs to be included as part of section 1, which is the first section of development that would be included for a final development plan before the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as the pedestrian crossing that Tina mentioned. As I said, we want to have detailed information regarding the cart paths and whether or not they are meeting compliance with city standards if they are to be used and retained as part of the development. And then there are some details regarding hedges required for side quarter-loaded garages, and we want to make sure that at the edge of the lot where the driveway meets the road, those hedges don't inhibit visibility. So we want to make sure that that is clarified in the text as well. So those are the conditions we are recommending be part of the record, and those come with our approval recommendation for the rezoning and preliminary development plan. The preliminary plat carries different criteria, and we are recommending approval of that. Requires a separate motion from Planning and Zoning Commission as well as City Council, and we wanted to make sure that the plat is also updated in terms of the open space dedication. As I said, there is some discrepancy there. So with that, I am done. Our City of Dublin team is done with their presentation. We're here for any questions that you may have, of course. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you. Is the applicant present? Would you please step forward to state your name and address into the record?
My name is Jeffrey L. Brown. I'm an attorney with the firm of Smith & Hale, 37 West Broad Street, Columbus. Tonight I'll be speaking along with Greg Chillog, our planner, and Charlie Ruma. The last few months since you've seen us, we've been working diligently with staff and with the neighbors to make revisions to this plan. And what you see tonight is the result of those conversations. We've dropped a substantial number of the units. We've gone from 284 to 240. We added 5 acres of open space to bring us up to 63 acres of open space with this development. When we were here on the concept plan, density seemed to be a big question in terms of, how do we relate to what's around us? And when you look at the information that we have provided, the properties to the north are between 1.89 to 3.28, to the south 1.58 to 2, and then Muirfield across the street, when you're comparing apples to apples, is 1.47. So when you look at our particular density based on one of the conditions tonight in the staff report for us to delete additional 4 lots, which we are happy to do, that brings our density down to 1.412. So at the end of the day, with this development plan, we're at a density that is below our neighbors, and we have more open space than our adjacent property owners. Conservation development has also been a topic. You heard Steve talk about that. The interesting part about that discussion, when you look at the comprehensive plan, one of the special planning areas that was looked at where this could occur was the Glacier Ridge sub-area. I think it's sub-area E. That sub-area begins west of Highland Croy. So it's not on our property. In addition to that, when you look at the aerial map, you realize that Riviera is really the hole in the donut. It is developed as a golf course. Things have happened to the ground with the development of the golf course. You have pavement, you have the clubhouse banquet facilities, you have the maintenance facilities, and the ponds that have been created. It is also not at the edge of Dublin. We have either residential or institutional uses around our property. But based on our earlier conversations with staff, as Steve explained, we did look at the conservation principles, and we went through that process with staff trying to identify the important areas and then build our site plan around that. And I think when you look at the comparison slide that was shown there, you saw how we were able to do that in terms of what we were preserving in terms of the stream corridor, the pond area, and the wooded areas with this property. The other thing that has occurred with our development is a contact made by the school system with Charlie Ruma. There's obviously a middle school, lower school, and a high school adjacent to this site. And the school has expressed some interest in another location. Again, in response to that, we redesigned our plan, created a site, and reduced what we were going to do with that property. The end result of this is that we've committed this as open space. And so what you have there is an additional 15 acres that backs up to the high school, which staff was very interested in kind of creating a better buffer, because originally when you looked at our concept plan, we had houses backing up there. So I think this is a solution that works for everybody. And at the end result of this is that it's open space that we're going to give to the City of Dublin. And if the City of Dublin and the school at a later date work something out there, that's fine. But at a minimum, it shows as open space and will be dedicated to the city, and then the city can move forward with what they want to do with the school district. The last part of this, and I think a very important part of this overall discussion, is Charlie Ruma. He has a long history with Dublin. He's done many wonderful projects that you've seen and enjoyed. And I think in terms of this particular deal, he's tried to work with the community. We've made numerous changes in our drawings, trying to respond to every request that we could do. And he is a developer that knows the community standards of Dublin and has acted on those, and will do it again with this particular development. Greg, you want to talk about the site? Oh, would you like me to answer the conditions now, or do that at the end? Or
I think we'll probably wait.
Okay.
They may evolve into some different things through the course of our discussion, but we'll see. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Greg Chillog, landscape architect with the Edge Group, 330 West Spring Street, Columbus. I originally planned to talk about a lot of things that have already been covered. I think the staff did an excellent job of kind of pointing out some of the highlights that really helped drive the design of this plan. You know, it's just, it's not just 240 single-family homes on 167 acres and a density. There's a process that we actually go through to locate these things in a proper manner, and that's what I want to talk about is, you know, kind of that build on that process of what Steve started talking about. And when we start to look at sites, there are external influences on this site and there are internal influences on the site. And what I mean by that is, like the external influences, we look at the surrounding uses. You know, where are they specifically to our site? What borders our site? What impacts do they have on us? What impacts do we have on them? You know, some of those uses we have large lot single family. We've got some more traditional single family lots here to the south. Multifamily here, Savona and Tartan West. And we've got significant institutional uses on this that border directly to us. The Dublin Jerome High School, Grizel Middle School, and Deer Run Elementary. So those are just some of the surrounding uses and their proximity to us. The other things that we want to look at are the densities. And, you know, one of the earlier in our concept plan meeting with you folks, the slide came up with the, we want to study this area immediately to our east in Muirfield, basically from Muirfield Drive to Avery, east to west, and from Glick to Brand, north to south. And in our study of this, we found that this is 504 acres within Muirfield Village. Within that area is plus or minus 18 acres of commercial. There's 97,000 square feet of commercial here. There's about 16 acres for the club banquet facility. And there's about 5 acres here for the maintenance facility. And what that does is it leaves like about 465 acres that are residential and open space.
And within that area is 683 lots. That gets us to the 1.47 density number for this quadrant of Muirfield Village. Another piece we wanted to look at a little more detail was Belvedere. Belvedere is 97 acres. Inside Belvedere, we have 154 single-family lots. That's a density of 1.58. That's what our density would be if you didn't count the school site. One other thing I want to highlight is the open space percentage. The open space percentage in that 465 acres in Muirfield is 36.5%, I believe. In Belvedere, they're at 27. Our plan proposes 36%. So we're either meeting or exceeding all of our the standards that are around us. Some other external influences that we look at are, where are the open space connections that surround us? What are we connecting to ultimately? And one of the major things on our site, we have Shannon Glen Park that extends down the tributary North Fork Indian Run, and we also have extensions of open space along that same stream through Tartan West, which lead us directly to Glacier Ridge Metro Park. Crossing up here at McKittrick and Highland Croy gets us right into the Metro Park. And that coincides with the stream corridor areas. So it's a very critical connection that we look at. Those are external influences that are going to impact our site and how we design it. And some of the other items, the street connections. Connection here, connection here, and connection here. Claudia, could you go to our slide 1, please? So some of our internal influences, what we see on site, and this is where we start to talk more about what Steve had described to you. He did a very good job. Can we go to slide 1, please? Thank you. What we do is we try to identify development zones, or what areas of the site are best for development. And so when we look at the site, as our friend Randall Arndt points out, primary conservation areas are stream corridors, floodplains, wetlands. We don't have any wetlands on the site. They've been surveyed. There aren't any jurisdictional wetlands, but there are jurisdictional streams, and those run through here and here. Interesting, some secondary conservation areas deal with vegetation. This area here, and along the perimeter of the sites really contain the most significant stands of trees. They're the oldest trees, they're the largest trees, and they happen to fall within that corridor zone. As I stated, there aren't any wetlands on the site. We look at the floodplains, and what we start to see is how we start to connect external elements, open space with the potential for this connection. And we also start to look at how do we connect people to the school, to the high school, and how do we connect the two schools together? So what it starts to do is it starts to create a framework for us, and what we're left with are kind of these zones here and here for development. One other large internal influence is stormwater management. Especially here in Dublin, it takes a lot of land to manage your stormwater. And there are appropriate places that happens. And in this case, they're down towards the southern end of the property, being that the site is predominantly draining this direction, so we're catching water here and here. And what we're trying to do is incorporate those elements into a pretty substantial system that is very accessible, it's open, it's very visible, and it has a lot of programmable space for the future. Just want to talk about some of the elements of the plan. We talked about the single-family products. We have 3 different products on the site. Subarea A has the larger lots, 100-foot lots. That's in this area. And going back to some of those external influences, what we see here is in Belvedere, these are 90, 95-foot lots. So what we want to do is place our larger lots next to them. They're larger, they're deeper. So there's kind of it's rational that we do that there. The subarea B, which would be these lots, that's kind of the more traditional sized lots that you might see in Shannon Glen, some in Belvedere. Those are the 75 to 90-foot lots. And then in Subareas C, in this area, is our age-targeted product, which ranges from 55 to 70-foot lots. A little bit about the open space here. You know, as I've stated before, this north-south connection is very, very important to the overall connection from areas to our south all the way to Glacier Ridge Metro Park. It's a critical connection. The schools connection, we're maintaining buffer along the north edge with a cart path that also provides access to the elementary school, east-west. We're providing open space connections and possibly some reuse of the cart paths along the south that gets us to Dublin, Jerome High School. So you can actually flow through all this open space or through the neighborhood streets and get easy access to the system and get to the schools or to the major parks in the area, Glacier Ridge or Shannon Glen. You know, I also want to talk about, as I have, you know, this larger assemblage in the center. It's large. It's going to be opened up. It's very visible. Programmable space here, programmable space in here. We have programmable space at the entrance, and this is programmable space. The 15-acre park to the west. You know, just want to touch on this. You know, as an external influence, this working through the concept plan with staff and hearing your comments, this became a major driver of how we treat this area. You know, and initially you say, well, just make it green space, and that's certainly what we ended up doing here. And the potential for the future elementary school there just, I think, enhances that. It's a good neighbor to the stadium. The use of single family next to the elementary school is fine. One other element staff touched on is possibly the reuse of some of the cart paths on the site. We try to incorporate those into the plan as best we can, and if they meet the standard, you know, we can use those. If not, they'll be upgraded. But internal on this system, we have about a half-mile walking loop around the pond here. There's about a 3/10 of an acre loop here around this system. And then this area around the larger piece is about 8/10 of a mile. So 5/10 of a mile, 3/10, 8/10 of a mile. It's pretty nice options for walking in a loop system. You know, and just to kind of summarize, you know, and I think Jeff touched on it, you know, we're proposing 1.44 DUs to the acre. That would make us the lowest in the area out here. Right here in Tartan, we have 3.23, 1.9, 1.58 Belvedere, 1.47 in Muirfield. We're below all those. And when you look at how we compare with open space and the connections that we're providing, we're at 36%. The Muirfield section is at 36. Belvedere's at 27. Shannon Glen's at 23. Tartan Ridge 36. Seldick Crossing recently was at 31%. You know, so we're right in there. So it fits into the neighborhood. And like I said, we're really not driving what's happening around us. We're really responding to what's around us and trying to put our products where they need to be. Claudia, can you go to the next slide, please? Like I said, the major part of this is the open space system, and what we've done here is just kind of do an enlargement of our concept for the entry feature, which would be fronts of houses or sides all along Avery Road, and then this opens all up to a public park here, which ultimately connects down into the large internal system. This area here is about 600 feet long. This is about 300 feet long. This area can be programmed for benches, walking, public gardens, anything like that. We're kind of suggesting some type of signage or entry feature for the community here. Claudia, can you go to the next slide, please? And then what we're showing here is just kind of a bird's eye perspective looking west across that entrance, showing sub-area A here, sub-area B, the connection down into the larger greenway system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charlie, and I'll be available for any questions. I think we're good.
My name is Charlie Ruma. I'm a, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold, like many others. I've been developing in Columbus, Ohio, Central Ohio, for the past 45 years. I've developed well over 50 developments, somewhere in excess of 10,000 lots in Central Ohio. Notably, in Dublin, we developed Wedgwood Hills, which is a 91-lot subdivision on 70 acres adjacent to the south edge of Wedgwood subdivision in Delaware County. That's a high-end product. It's probably one of the very, very nicest communities that's in Dublin. It's wooded with ravines, and it's just an excellent place. We developed Riverside Woods, which is near the Hard Road side of high school. It is surrounded. It is around the fire station that is on the corner of Hard Road and Route 257. It is magnificent. The product is not as high end as Wedgwood Hills, certainly, but it's really a great product, high quality. We did a great job of architectural control and product control in that area, as well as preserving a great deal of the open space and wooded area. And lastly, the Wedgwood Glen area, which used to be the Conine Pig Farm on Summit View, we redeveloped that into an area that probably will be very similar to the northern part of what we would do at Riviera. I believe that it speaks for itself. It's just a wonderful place, great architecture, good preservation, good open spaces, good park system. We even rebuilt the barn at the entry with Dublin for maintenance facilities. It's really a great community. We when we develop, really are strict about architectural control, and that's we, the developer. We know that we're going to be dealing with the Dublin Appearance Code, and we've agreed to make sure that all product does meet the Dublin Appearance Code. But in addition, we hire an architect to approve plans. I don't do that myself. We've hired an architect, and we did this throughout all of our communities in the past 2 decades. All of Wedgwood Golf and Country Club was approved by Bob Apel. Individual homes, individual colors, individual roof styles, individual lot settings. And we found that really enhances the community and enhances what happens to the value of the housing in that area, as well as the value of the remaining lots as we continue ahead. So it really makes sense. That same kind of attention and detail will go on in Riviera. That's what my intention is. It's to make sure that we continue ahead with a very, very high quality program. All the lots to the south in this area are going to be 100-foot lots, and will be in the high end, more like the product that was developed at Wedgwood Hills. Let me just speak about Riviera. I don't think anybody in this room wants to see Riviera go away. Nobody. Not me, not the members of Riviera, not the community. None of us want to see it go away. It's unfortunate that it is. I mean, it really is. It has been part of the Dublin community for the past 50 years. The original American-Italian Golf Association bought this property in the 60s. And they developed this golf course in the latter part of the 60s, and they opened it in the 70s, and actually 1970. They have been good citizens. This golf course is not working anymore. The model that was set up for the American Italian Golf Association no longer works. The membership age, the new members didn't have the same outlook and same family makeup and desire that occurred 50 years ago, and when this club was developed. And more importantly, the competition that this club has seen from Muirfield Village to Muirfield Country Club to Tartan West to everything, almost everything under the sun. There's so many golf courses that really have taken away its membership because they're more family-oriented. They've got country clubs that have exercise facilities and golf and swimming pool facilities and workout, and tennis courts, etc. This doesn't. This year, the golf course was very aggressive about make sure that they get play on the golf course. And I can report to you, and I think they will if you ask, that golf course is going to lose almost $250,000 this year. So they can't continue. They just cannot continue to operate and while away the funds and the equity of the American Italian Golf Association. And so it needs to be sold, and it will be closed. They have been paying taxes to Dublin for half a century. They have been citizens who have been responsible for helping pay for the roads and the schools and the extension of utilities. They're the longest ownership, I believe, property owners in the near neighborhood. I mean, everybody around them has been developed. Everybody around it has been sold, and this is the last remaining site. So what we're dealing with is an infill site. They just want the same rights, the same kind of rights that their neighbors had when they developed their properties. They're not looking to enrich themselves by high density. They're not looking to enrich themselves by doing something that's destructive to the neighborhood. They're looking to at least have the same equal opportunities that their neighbors had when their sites developed. And that's kind of what this proposal is. In March, at the concept plan, you all agreed that you'd rather have a PUD rather than utilize the existing units, the existing zoning, principally because you had more control. You could control what was going to happen to the site. You could demand open space. You could demand connectivity. You wanted a buffer area to the high school. You wanted usable open spaces. I heard that several times. You wanted connectivities, especially paths to the schools. You encouraged us to develop age-targeted housing for empty nesters. You wanted to make sure that Avery Road was protected and we didn't have houses backing up to Avery Road, and did what we could in terms of vistas and setbacks. And very clearly you said the density was way too high. Well, we heard that. I mean, we heard that. And our product tonight is one that connects neighborhoods. You heard Greg Chillog tell you what we've done with paths and open space and connectivity to the areas around us. Now think about this. Who wouldn't want to live here where a child can go from pre-K to 12 on his bicycle or walk? This is the only community that I know that has the potential of having children walking to school from kindergarten to 12th grade. It's incredible. It's a great site. It's a good opportunity, and we've taken advantage of the schools that are connecting to us by making sure that we connect to them through a path system. I dealt directly with the superintendent of schools, and he is permitting us to go onto the school property so that we can extend our paths into their property and connect to their sidewalks and pathway system. In terms of density, we're going to remove 4 lots, as asked by staff. That brings us to 236 lots on 167.1 acres. That's 1.12 1.412 units an acre. 4.12. And that's less than anything else. I personally counted the housing units in Muirfield. There's 683 residential units on 465 acres. You can do the math. It comes up to 1.467 units an acre. So one of the points in terms of density was that we had to meet or be less than what was existing in the area. Well, we've done that. We've made connections. We've got a great plan. And lastly, I want to talk about the school system. I met, Dr. Hoadley called me and asked if I would consider the possibility of preserving some space in Riviera for the potential of redevelopment of Deer Run Elementary. Deer Run is a school that's 30 to 35 years old. It's beginning to show its age. It doesn't have all of the modern amenities that new schools have. And it is flexible in terms of its space. It has had a growth situation in the past decade that required them to put trailers in. But right now that school population is diminishing. So we're not sure whether or not that school will be replaced. In terms of planning, he wanted to make sure that when he looked around where this school could potentially be replaced, there is no site. There are no other locations that would amply handle the relocation or the redevelopment of Deer Run. And so I said, great, I'd love to do that. And we worked out a situation where we took the land that was probably the most problem for us, which is adjacent to the football stadium, and we replaced it with a 15-acre tract that would house an elementary school if and when they ever decide to do that. We are dedicating that land to the city. We are transferring that land to the city at the outset. It is open space and it is parkland, with the understanding and agreement that should the schools at any time in the future desire to build a school there, that the city would transfer that site to the school system at no cost. I think we've got a very commendable proposal. I've worked on a lot of sites. I think this is one of the best developments I've ever put together. I really like what we've done. I like the way we've utilized the land. I like the mix in terms of product that we can develop, and I really hope that we can get approval and permit the American Italian Golf Association to move on to new headquarters. Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. Okay, that's going to bring us to our public comment portion of the meeting this evening. And like I said, there are some folks that have signed up, and if you didn't have opportunity to sign up, that certainly won't preclude you from speaking. And I understand that the homeowners association adjacents would like to go first, and maybe they'll get a lot of the issues on the table and might make things go a bit quicker for the rest of our public comments. There is a lady waving her hand at me. Yes, ma'am.
If we have questions as opposed to comments, does that require, I just wondered, is that?
Great question. So these meetings are recorded. We have our stenographer over here, and it is imperative that we make everything part of the public record so that long after we're gone, someone else can know what happened this evening. So everything will be required to come up front. We will not answer question by question as each individual comes to the podium, but I will be making a list, and we will try to address all of those things in our individual comments. Okay, great, thanks. And Mr. Walter wanted to start off this evening.
Sure. My name's Kevin Walter, 6289 Ross Bend in Dublin. Good evening. I'd like to start by thanking the City of Dublin for providing this unique arrangement to allow the Citizens Action Group the opportunity to formally address the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm proud to be part of a city that truly values public input and works to provide forums that hopefully result in the sharing of information and opinion that inform the best decisions possible. By way of introduction, I represent a coalition of 9 homeowners associations, community groups, and other concerns, including Muirfield Village Civic Association, Savona Commons, Belvedere HOA, Brandon HOA, Tartan West HOA, Celtic Estates, there's no hills there, sorry. Wellington Place HOA, Park Place Post Reserve HOA, and the Friends of Dublin organization. We're actively working over the last year to educate and inform those interested in the Riviera development. Some time ago in discussions with a member of City Council, they challenged me to demonstrate that our group was more than a parochial voice concerned about our own backyard. To that end, we posted a survey to understand the breadth of concern over the Riviera development. You can see from this graphic that 2,771 people were surveyed and 696 residents responded with address information, allowing us to visually depict the strength of concern over this issue. As you can see, the issue concerns many residents across the city. I speak for them and all those who have called, emailed, written, or discussed this issue. Before I begin, I did want to lay out the speaking strategy for you tonight so you understand exactly the position of our group. Given that there are 2 votes this evening, one for rezoning and a second for preliminary development plan, we intend to present 2 discussions. One focused on opposition to the rezoning, and the other discussion by Christine Goronsky focused on the preliminary development plan. Our group's primary objective is opposition to the rezoning. However, given the format of the proceedings, Christine will discuss the preliminary development plan concerns should rezoning pass this evening. In your packets this week, we prepared an alternative staff report to the one you received. We looked at the same review criteria required by Dublin City Code as the staff report and came to vastly different recommendations. In some areas of our report, we referenced information that was contained in the previous application. That may have slightly changed in the newest application, so we apologize for some misinformation there. Regardless, categorically, our recommendation is disapproval. While we point out many areas of concern on our report, there are a few specific ones that I will discuss this evening. I will discuss our concerns as specifically apply to the review criteria 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, and 13. Thank you for your attention, and let me begin. The staff report contains a discussion of the status of the Riviera in the community plan as discussed this evening. I thought it appropriate to have a full discussion on the topic as we set the table for our primary concerns. In 1988, Riviera was depicted as parks and open space. During that time in the development of the city, the community plan was simply a depiction of what existed as the city formed. And as the applicant indicated, Riviera was in fact open space with no underlying zoning classification. It is what was there. In 1997, 83 acres of the site, the area on the western edge, was designated as parkland in anticipation of its inclusion into the Glacier Ridge Metro Park. With the formation of Glacier Ridge on other parcels, in 2003, Dublin City Council provided an underlying rezoning to the R1 classification to the acreage on the Franklin County area through Ordinance 6503. This classification made sense given that parks and open space is a use within R1 classification. In 2007, as stated in the staff report, the owner of the Riviera Golf Club requested a depiction of parks and open space on the community plan. Council agreed and changed the visual representation to the use of parks and open space with an R1 classification. Again, an accurate and proper designation. Further, in 2013, updated the community plan, City Council again affirmed the R1 classification and the parks and open space depiction in the community plan. To be clear, we take no issue with the community plan designation of an R1 residential zoning with parks and open space depiction. We understand that parks and open space is not the only permitted use under R1, and we would support any use permitted by an R1 development, including the redevelopment of this site, under the subdivision guideline regulations of the Dublin City Code. Clearly, we understand that the community plan is a guide and it's malleable, but it's also the stated intention of Dublin City Council, and as such, deviation from the plan should be considered against not only the developer application, but also balanced against the stated intent of council and the general welfare of the community as a whole. In the current community plan, reaffirmed in 2013, Riviera is depicted as appropriate for conservation design subdivision in map 3.2b. Further, City Council reviewed 3 trend build-out scenarios. In the preferred mid-range scenario, Riviera was designated as a conservation design development. The city continues to use the mid-range planning scenario for development decisions. The land use principles and walkability standards used across your planning initiatives within the city are all based upon the mid-range scenario as the favored development scenario. Consequently, a reasonable person would reasonably assume that council prefers the mid-range scenario, and given that it is included in the most current community plan, that their intention is to continue to use the community plan and the classification therein as a guiding document. We would argue that the Riviera site is correctly depicted as a parcel with R1 zoning, depicted as parks and open space, and with the preferred intent, developing the site as a conservation design subdivision. The staff report completely conflagrates the designation of Riviera as a conservation design subdivision with the writings of Randall Arndt and their ability to pick and choose when to apply the community plan, which elements of the plan, and which elements of council's stated intent applies to development applications. I'll attempt to disentangle that concept. In 2004, as was stated, Dublin City Council passed Resolution 2704, affirming conservation design as a desired development pattern for areas north and west in the city, and specifically spelling out criteria that needs to be in place for a development to contain characteristics of conservation design. The staff report cannot be more wrong on its discussion of the requirements for the Riviera application to conform to conservation design principles. The staff report states that Resolution 2704 encourages but does not require the incorporation of conservation design principles. In fact, it not only requires but compels the incorporation of conservation design principles. Further, the staff report indicates that Randall Arndt writes that golf courses are not considered conservation design. In fact, if you read the entire passage in context, Arndt is indicating that new developments that use golf courses are not, within them, are not considered to be using conservation design standards. He is not discussing the appropriateness of redeveloping golf courses into conservation design developments. They have the intent of the passage exactly backwards. So I thought it appropriate to read parts of the resolution since it's so important. So I apologize to take you through the resolution, but I think it's important to hear. Resolution 2704 reads in part, quote, this is long, sorry. Whereas the City of Dublin encourages creative site planning and design flexibility to establish interesting and aesthetically pleasing residential environments, and housing should be provided in the most livable and design-sensitive manner possible. And whereas quality of life and the sense of place are important economic assets to retaining existing businesses and attracting new economic development within the City of Dublin, and whereas procedures for planned development districts are intended to provide variations from typical development standards and conventional subdivision design in order to create higher quality developments to enhance the City of Dublin. And whereas planned development district proposals must recognize that residential development is an important facet in the overall development and livability of the City of Dublin, and each proposal must function both within its confines and of its own boundaries and within the context of the surrounding areas. And whereas the decisions of the Dublin Community Plan are based in large part on the measurable impacts of the development, and whereas the Community Plan recommends the protection and preservation of rural character in outlying areas in the Northwest and elsewhere, and whereas the Community Plan recommends the preservation of natural features and open space, and whereas the Community Plan designates areas for lower density residential development along the river corridor and in outlying areas, and whereas the Community Plan amasses a large metro park to create a green belt and define a definitive city edge to avoid a massive continuous development, and whereas the Community Plan revising Dublin ordinances, where the Community Plan recommends revising Dublin ordinances to facilitate the preservation of rural character, whereas the Community Plan recommends to use cluster residential development adjacent to the metro park to preserve open space and rural character, whereas the Community Plan includes land use map based upon preferred scenario for computer modeling in the impacts of development, and whereas many residential subdivisions have been developed in the city of Dublin that exhibit similar layout characteristics with similar appearances and provide large housing stock, whereas continuing this development pattern will create a repetitious environment for the city as a whole and limit the housing choices of residents, and whereas the city of Dublin desires to broaden the housing choices available to its residents and remains highly committed to high quality in all housing options to serve existing and future residents, and whereas the community desires to avoid repetition and to create a diverse and dynamic environment as the city continues to develop, and whereas the city of Dublin desires to preserve natural features of the land, the open vistas and open space in general whenever possible, and whereas conservation design practices are based on the natural resources of the land being developed and provide for preservation of substantial open space, and whereas conservation design principles should be employed to further both open space and housing goals of the City of Dublin, and whereas the City of Dublin and its Planning and Zoning Commission have indicated support for such practices on a continuing basis, now therefore, we got to the now therefore part, now therefore be it resolved by the City of Dublin and the elected members concurring, Section 1, new development shall provide a variety of housing styles and designs and preserve open space and natural features. New development proposals need to conform to the density ranges and impact recommendations in the adopted community plan based on gross density calculations for the development. The upper limits of the density ranges should be considered only where public facilities support it, where important natural features are being preserved and not inconsistent with existing or future neighbor land uses. The city will require all new resident proposals where a planned development district is requested to provide a layout based on conservation design practices indicating at least 50% open space for evaluation, end quote. The current application is for 36% open quote, significantly short of the 50% requirement. Quote, Section 2, sites with woods, streams, river frontage, steep slopes, and other natural features or otherwise provide significant open space will be considered as prime candidates for employing conservation design techniques. Additionally, conservation design techniques should be incorporated wherever possible for development sites located along the river, at the outskirts of the municipality, or within proximity to the Glacier Ridge Metro Park, end quote. Riviera has streams, ponds, mature trees, significant open space. It's situated 977 feet from the city border and within 1,062 feet of Glacier Ridge Metro Park. Quote, Section 3, conservation layouts being submitted for evaluation should be based upon and adhere to the design criteria for conservation design that calls for clustering of available density onto smaller grouped individual building areas. Conservation layout should be generally adhered to in the following principles. All design projects should strive for at least 50% open space areas. All conservation design projects should strive to have at least 75% of the dwelling units directly adjacent to the open space areas. Dwelling units should be clustered in patterns that preserve sizable open space and still disperse the dwelling units to permit a high percentage to be directly adjacent to the open space, end quote. To meet the 75% criteria, the application would need to have at least 180 lots adjacent to open space. Given the most stringent definition of directly adjacent, the application falls 86 lots short. Given the more relaxed definition affording parcels to be across the street or a public or private street, the application still falls 53 lots short of the standard. Quote, all conservation design projects should attempt to provide large setbacks from existing streets, especially designated scenic roads, and to create a separate area identity surrounded with open areas specifically preserved in the development of these projects, end quote. It is our contention that the words surrounded with open areas would indicate that the site must completely be surrounded by open space to create a buffer to preserve the unique characteristics of the site. Quote, hold on. Wherever possible, the street system should have a curvilinear pattern that will maximize traffic speed, support the housing development pattern, and protect natural features," end quote. The resolution provides graphics. The resolution itself provides graphics depicting the intent of curvilinear street patterns and how lots should be positioned to maximize exposure to open space. Here you can see the intent of curvilinear streets, and here you can see what a conventional street grid looks like. And here is what Riviera's proposed street grid looks like. This in no way meets the goals or intent of conservation design. Conventional, curvilinear. There's been some discussion about the enforceability of a resolution as compared to an ordinance. It is a fact that a resolution is enacted legislation by the City Council. A resolution maintains the same force of law as an ordinance. Dublin City Code Section 4.01 defines a resolution as, quote, "a legislative action" of City Council. Further, Section 4.01b, quote, "Council shall use a resolution where practical for any legislation of a temporary, informal, or ceremonial nature," end quote. Temporary can be defined as that which is to last for a limited time only, as distinguished from that which is perpetual or indefinite in its duration. Some municipalities in Ohio, like Avon Lake, use resolutions for all zoning issues because they feel that zoning is transient and that the passage of another resolution or a permanent ordinance has the original resolution nullified. We would submit that a resolution remains in effect until such time as City Council either passes a resolution to end or otherwise time box an existing resolution. Specifically, Resolution 2704 was enacted by the City of Dublin to express what conservation design is, where it applies within the city, and how to use it with very prescriptive modeling. Further, Resolution 2704 specifically is mentioned in Land Use Objective 13 of the Community Plan, affirming Dublin City Council's desire to preserve and protect the northwest areas of the city. It is clear, that Resolution 2704 applies to the Riviera property. City staff is not at liberty to dismiss the importance of the resolution, its applicability to the Riviera property, or to indicate that the developer generally followed Randall Arndt's process. In fact, Randall Arndt's theories and philosophies are not applicable in any way. What he thinks about conservation design, how staff interprets that, and chooses to apply or not to apply his theories are completely irrelevant to this application. The fact of the matter is that City Council has spelled out in words, pictures, and legislative action on numerous occasions that conservation design is important and that developers must, and the city will, require conservation design principles on new development in Northwest Dublin. For those of you that are on the commission that measure developer success by their ability to meet city code, rest assured that this development in no way meets the spirit or intent or the letter of the Dublin City Council legislative action expressed in Resolution 2704. Now, short discussion on traffic. Short. I am, by my own admission, not a traffic engineer or a traffic expert. I have spent countless hours reading and attempting to understand the voluminous traffic report provided by the applicant. I've read the initial study and the accompanying update based upon the new proposal. I have gone as far as to get a copy of the very large Trip Generation Manual, 9th edition, from the University of Washington's library. Further, I have discussed the traffic report with professional traffic engineers, and in all that research, I agree that it appears that it appears to have conducted appropriately and according to industry standards. Trip calculations seem to be calculated in a way that readily accepted using appropriate trip classifications. Given that, however, there are a few anomalies that are quite curious to me. As we all know, there's a high school nearby. Belvedere residents already deal with a significant amount of cut-through morning traffic. These two images show the lineup of cars on both sides of Summerhouse Drive turning onto Abbey Glen, and the backup of cars in the background on Brand Road. Now, if you take a quick look at the traffic report, that shows that while Belvedere is a community of 154 homes, it generates 113 right turns from Abbey Glen to Brand Road, headed towards the high school. Riviera, a community of 240 homes, 90 homes more, will only generate 38 trips headed to Jerome High School across all exits, and only 4 additional trips at Abbey Glen. Further, the traffic study shows that the number of cars exiting Riviera at Avery Road and turning left onto Memorial Drive is 0. Not one single car is anticipated to come out of the development and head into Muirfield. I find these types of assumptions simply out of the scope of reality and make me question the overall validity of the entire traffic report. While I agree that the report is voluminous and detailed, I cannot square that predictive modeling with that which I know to be true each and every morning. Quite simply, I question the traffic study and its interpretation of the limited impact the development will have on neighboring traffic volumes and critical intersections such as Brand and Avery. Finally, turning to design standards. It is clear that the Riviera development text is simply lacking in detail. The review criteria for design standards states that the proposed development must meet or exceed the quality of building designs in the surrounding area. We believe that the development text is very weak, is lacking in specificity, and only rises to the bar of meeting city code. As an example, the architectural section of the development text is expressed in 522 words, including 30 words of headers. In contrast, the architectural section of Tartan Ridge development text is 4,046 words long with 69 pictures or diagrams providing a visual representation of the text. The level of detail in the development text assures Dublin that a quality development will become reality. Today, the applicant said it is his intention to do that. Tartan Ridge put it in words. The development text is the blueprint that is the basis for all building within the development. Review criterion 13 requires that you evaluate the development based upon comparable designs in the surrounding community. Tartan Ridge offers a wonderful template for acceptable development text. As further example, Tartan Ridge has an in-depth discussion of four-sided architecture. This is the full discussion of four-sided architecture in the Riviera application. It says four-sided architecture, A, similar architectural design elements and details shall be consistent throughout all elevations of the structure, and B, Dublin residential appearance code will be adhered to throughout the entire subdivision unless otherwise stated herein. It sets the bar for four-sided architecture at Dublin City Code, nothing more. While the code certainly is an appropriate starting place, it is in no way a strong enough statement about the development that would be expected in this development. One of the fundamental premises of plan unit developments is that the city allows greater density in exchange for more control over development standards. If you don't hold the developer to a standard greater than that offered by Dublin City Code, half of the currency in the PUD process is compromised. We must hold Riviera to a standard equal to or greater than the standard set by Tartan Ridge. In closing, let me reiterate our position. Categorically, our recommendation is for disapproval of the rezoning and preliminary development plan. Among others, the application fails to meet review criteria 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, and 13. We implore you to do the right thing tonight. We ask that you consider what I've said, what Dublin City Council has expressed in words, actions, pictures, and legislation, we ask that you carefully consider what overall benefit to the City of Dublin is in redeveloping this site in this manner, and we ask that you stand up for Dublin's future and vote no on the rezoning of preliminary development plan. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, well, I would like to thank the Homeowners Association for having a coordinated effort, and hopefully that gets a lot of the issues off the table. We'll put the timer on for subsequent presentations or subsequent thoughts at the microphone, but thank you for being a united front, and thank you for getting many of the issues that we've heard relative to this on the table, so we can hopefully avoid some repetition this evening. Okay. Okay. There is a phase 2 to your presentation. I was unaware. Okay. I think we will handle the preliminary development plan, or the rezoning preliminary development plan first, because that will bring it to a vote. Following that, we will do the preliminary plat. Is that okay? Okay. So the issues that we will talk basically now is with the preliminary development plan, and we'll handle the platting issues following the development plan. Okay. Okay. Like I said, we'll handle everything here together, and then we will divide and conquer and do what we need to do. So please, phase 2 of the Adjacent Homeowners Association presentation.
Thank you very much, Chairman Ambrose Grooms. I apologize. I have to. My name is Christine Goronsky, 7691 Worsley Place in the Brandon subdivision. I am currently president of the Brandon Homeowners Association, and I have been proud to be part of the Coalition of Concerned Citizens. As Kevin told you, the 9 homeowner and civic associations which have come together to advocate for what is best for the city of Dublin as you consider what's before you this evening. Again, as Kevin did, I'd like to thank you for your time. We residents of Dublin are extremely fortunate that we have an opportunity to participate in our community planning, to be heard. It's a wonderful exercise for all of us that we can be part of this together in our city. Also, I would like to, I have heard from some people that there is possibly that we are saying we're in, let's drop the drawbridge and not let anyone else in Dublin, and that is not at all what is happening here. And I believe Mr. Walters made that very clear. I would like to state I do agree with everything Mr. Walter addressed in his presentation. I hope you do decide this proposed development is not in keeping with the community plan, is not consistent with conservation development, and that it does fail significantly to meet all 16 criteria used to evaluate new development in Dublin, and we hope you'd reject it. However, having said that, I am going to ask you here tonight that if you do decide to move ahead with the rezoning, there are several conditions that we ask you impose as a condition of approval in addition to what the planning department has recommended. Number 1, with regards to density, I heard what Mr. Ruma and everyone said. The density numbers that they use for Tartan West and for Muirfield are not an apples-to-apples comparison. Those can include condominiums in Muirfield and a high-rise condominium in Tartan West. So we do request that the density match what the single-family housing density is in Muirfield and in Tartan West. I believe that comes in around, at Muirfield, 1.27 units per acre. We ask that this plan adhere to meeting or exceeding the building design of the surrounding area, and having that being single-family homes, this match the single-family homes in the surrounding areas. Also, the 1.412, I believe, is calculating using the 15 acres being donated to the school. We do ask that that be based without that 15 acres, that it be truly what is going to be used for this housing development. Secondly, the lot sizes. The plan presented this evening have some lots, a fair number, as small as 55 feet wide. The majority of lots are about 70 feet wide. This number of small lots is simply unacceptable. In the surrounding neighborhoods, for single-family homes, lots are in the 85 to 110-foot range, featuring side-load garages or three-car garages. Again, the same or better should be required from this proposed development. We do not want to see it dumbed down on this last jewel of green space that we have here in central Dublin. Also, instead of building the smaller lots together to create a patio home arrangement similar to the one in Corazon, it almost appears as if this new plan is playing a Tetris-style game and arranging the lots, force-fitting them together for maximum density. The size of the lots that are being proposed change the character of what was presented. We therefore ask that in reducing density, you require a minimum lot width of 85 feet and require each home to have a three-car garage, keeping parked cars off the street because we are going to have some traffic issues. This is very important for any place in Dublin, but particularly in an area that may contain an elementary school one day. For interdevelopment traffic, by placing the school area in the back of the site, this proposed development will force significant traffic through Amacon Drive and De Victor Way. Belvedere traffic will come along De Victor, and traffic from the elementary school parents east of the development will come along Amacon. They will converge on Forenza Place, especially at the intersection of Forenza and the cross streets. If this land is to be used for a school, the access is poorly planned, funneling much traffic past many homes. If the site isn't going to end up used for school use, then the placement of the open space is poor and should be spread throughout the development consistent with the conservation design. I understand Mr. Ruma, it was very generous to offer this to the schools, and I understand because it was the most problematic area for him to use this part, but maybe not the best part as an area for the school. We ask that you send this plan back for a complete reconfiguration requiring more reasonable and safer access to the proposed school property. Access to Highland Quarry Road, we agree with the planning department that too many cars will be dumped onto Avery, that this should not move forward until the developer has secured an access road to Highland Quarry, and we are very appreciative that the planning department put that in. Buffering and parks. In this development plan, too many lots intrude upon the stream and keep the stream from truly being open space. The open space should be presented as a community amenity. Unfortunately, the proposed lots provide no buffering for Grizel Middle School. We ask that you require a 50-foot buffer from all homes, as in Belvedere, where there's a 30-foot no-build zone and 20-foot drainage easement, and 60 feet next to Grizel Middle School, similar to what exists adjacent to Carr Middle School, plus better access to open space parks. Trees. One point that came up at the March presentation were when we were listing many of the issues that occurred at the Wellington Reserve development. When that was approved, Mr. Ruma stood here and promised that the landmark trees would be protected. When he came back in March, he seemed amazed that they weren't. When he sold the development to his son and the subcontractors that came out to work on it, there was, I believe, at least two, if not more, historic trees, one of which was approximately 200 years old. When the contractor was beginning to take it down, residents approached him and said, "That is a protected tree." He went ahead and took it out, was unable to save it. There are multiple landmark trees on the Riviera property, and we cannot afford to let that travesty be repeated here. Just as you require developers to add left turn lanes and make other expenditures for the common good, we ask that this developer be required to fund a temporary staff member for the city who would be tasked with monitoring and protecting landmark trees and natural treasures that we want to keep on the Riviera property. So in summarizing, this plan still is inadequate. We ask that you require a true apples to apples single family home density comparable to what we believe is 1.27 units per acre in Muirfield. And that it be based on 153 acres, not 168 acres. Lot minimum width of 85 feet and 3-car garages. table the plan until acceptable access to the school property is included in it, 50-foot buffers for all homes and 60 feet adjacent to the Grizel Middle School property, and protection of trees with an on-site staffer tasked with the job of a person who will report to the city staff, not the developer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we will be moving forward with public comments. Again, as I stated earlier, that I have a sign-up sheet, but other comments will be welcome. The first name on the sign-up sheet is a Kevin Mullins, and as a reminder, anyone who steps forward or who comes forward, if you could state your name and address into the record, that would be greatly appreciated. So the next individual on the speaker sign-up sheet is a Kevin Mullins.
Madam Chair, I spoke with Mr. Mullins earlier today, and he may be running extremely late, but he came in here
Okay.
to sign up to save a spot.
Good, well, we'll move him to the bottom. All right. Next, and again, I am in no way a linguist, so I'll try, but if I butcher your name, my apologies. Jeffrey Olszewski? Oleski, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Oleski. I live at 7013 Post Preserve Boulevard. I haven't had the opportunity to meet with Kevin, but great presentation. For the last 3 years, I've been in search of a new subdivision and have been all over Columbus, been to Powell, and lived in Dublin for 9 years. And when Riviera came about, my wife and I completely stopped looking in hopes that Riviera would be an amazing subdivision. And it has the opportunity. I've played Riviera, and but the problems I have are two things. Is in sub-area B, originally it was 30 acres, and now it's down to 15 acres, with the sub-area D being transformed to the elementary school. So that open area, what has happened is all 240 homes have shoved forward, because originally it was 280, then it went down to 240, but the homes have not changed at all. And all it is was smash the homes up there closer together. And that comes back to the density. The density is nowhere near where it needs to be. Because if you drive into Tartan Ridge and other subdivisions, even those homes are on top of each other. I think the opportunity is there to get it right and to be well under 200 homes at a minimum for the subdivision.
Very good, thank you. Okay, next we're going to hear from Mark Mace.
Hi, my name is Mark Mace, and I live at 6469 Greenstone Loop, and I happen to live on the course. And on behalf of four homeowners bordering the course, we, like most everyone, would prefer that Riviera remain green. Should this rezoning pass, we strongly believe that the proper buffering and preservation of the area's natural beauty and habitat is paramount for this development. To ensure environmental sensitivity, we respectfully request the ponds bordering Belvedere and the natural features surrounding these ponds remain in place while providing needed buffering and green space. The proposed plan submitted by Mr. Ruma for Planning and Zoning's consideration addresses these concerns by preserving the ponds and their surrounding features while contributing to the area's natural beauty and habitat. For these reasons, we commend Mr. Ruma and the proposed plan as it relates to the preservation of ponds, natural features, and the green space bordering Belvedere. And I want to thank you, and that's Belvedere homeowners on lots 100, 101, 102, and 103. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, next, and Andrew Eilerman? Am I close?
Hi, I'm Andrew Eilerman, and I live on 8142 Timble Falls Drive in Belvedere. And I had no intention of coming up here and speaking tonight, but I know that my wife would kick me in the butt if I did not. My wife and I moved to Dublin in 2012. Prior to that, we lived in Grove City, and at the time, we were searching for a safe and reasonable place that would be good looking forward for raising our children. And there are many good places to live in Columbus, but the best is Dublin. My wife works in Dublin. She works at Hand in Hand Pediatrics. She's a pediatrician and is, as pediatricians are, the safety queen of the world as far as children go. And her practice is actually in Muirfield Square, which is in the Memorial Subdivision. So we have concerns for, well, what I was going to say is I didn't prepare anything also because I feel like it's better to speak from your heart. And what I don't see proposed or talked about in any of these discussions tonight is what is in the heart and souls and minds of the residents that live near this area. And there are tons of children that live in Belvedere and other surrounding subdivisions. I am concerned about, as it stands, the retention ponds that are near, especially the proposed elementary school. I'm concerned about the traffic that will be happening, that we already see as a problem, not just around our subdivision, but going through our subdivision, as was alluded to get to Jerome High School or even over to Highland Croy. So I hope that you keep these in your mind as you make your decision tonight, and you do what's best for the residents of Dublin, the children of Dublin, our future, and please keep Riviera green.
Thank you. Okay, the next name on the sign-in sheet is Joe DeCesar.
I'm Joe DeCesar, and I live at 7636 Worsley Court in Brandon. And I've been a member of Riviera for 40 years, and I moved out to Mitchell DeWitt in 1978, and I've been in Brandon for 25 years with no move in between. So I've been out in the area for some time. I'm here basically to speak on behalf of the developer and the staff who I know have worked on this for a long period of time. I'm aware of all the homeowners associations. I've been a member of the Brandon Homeowner Association for 25 years. And sorry, Christine, I would like to just add my voice to the ones that would like to see Riviera become a subdivision. And I think Mr. Ruma has worked with the schools and the commission and the staff to present. I saw a lot of curvy linear roads, and I saw on the design of the conservation, the first thing listed in that list was 1.5 acres or per acre density, which he is under. So I thank you for your time, and I hope you vote to allow Mr. Ruman to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Emily Williams.
Hi there, my name is Emily Williams, and I live at 6290 Belvedere Green Boulevard. And I concur with, I think it's Andy Eilerman and Kevin Walters, just really speaking from the heart here on the traffic. My husband and I have lived on Belvedere Green for the last decade, and the traffic is just getting bad. It is horrible. We're currently working with the City of Dublin Police on traffic calming solutions, but we haven't gotten anywhere with it quite yet. I cannot imagine one more car turning on that road as a cut through to Jerome High School. I'm worried about the kids. I have personally witnessed 2 accidents right in front of my house in the past year, and that's 2 car accidents too many in a year in 25 mile per hour residential area. So that's my take on it. Traffic calming solutions, whatever the result of tonight is, we have to take that into serious consideration when doing a vote. It's bad. So thank you for allowing me to speak tonight, and that's it.
Very good, thank you. Okay, I will call a Kevin Mullins again. I don't know if he's had an opportunity to arrive. Sounds like perhaps he has not, so. Okay, would anyone else like to speak? Very good. Again, please step forward, state your name and address in the record, and we would be delighted to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. My name is Bob Fathman. My address is 5805 Tartan Circle North in Dublin. Tartan is misspelled Tarton. Our developer couldn't spell. He built a nice neighborhood, but misspelled the word Tartan, and we're stuck with it forever. It's actually in Dublin. It's not in Tartan Fields. The one thing I didn't hear anyone say up here that I just want to add one small piece to, and that is I heard the staff, or I saw the staff report saying that Phase 5 development should, I think, be kind of held up pending approval of a road all the way through to Highland Croy. I think the whole doggone plan ought to be deep-sixed until that's guaranteed. I mean, I certainly support everything Kevin said. I think the plan ought to be rejected for all the reasons he said. But if it does go forward, the one extra thing I wish you all would require is that it doesn't go forward at all, because we heard in March 13th a letter read from Todd Hoadley, the school superintendent, saying under no condition did the school have any interest at all in selling land on the north edge of Jerome High School to the developer to put an access road in. Mr. Mullins called me last night. I've never met him, but he lives in a home that has probably more frontage to the golf course than anyone else. His driveway comes off of Avery Road, and it's the house nearest the golf course. It's Highland Croy, comes off of Highland Croy all the way back there. And he said he was approached by Mr. Ruma and his staff asking if they could have an easement or purchase whatever his property, not purchase it. All they offered to do, he said, was to connect him to the water supply, which is already at the back edge of his property. He was insulted by the minimalist nature of that offer, and he turned him down. So I know that Mr. Mullins told me last night in a phone call, never met the guy, but he has no interest in selling. The school, we were told, has no interest in selling. So all these other things I'm hearing tonight are, well, there should be this road, and that'll help diminish some of the traffic concerns you've heard numerous speakers address here tonight. But there's no guarantee that's going to be done. What if nobody sells that land? Maybe there never will be. Would you allow the first 4 phases of this development to go through with and then stop it at Phase 5? Or should there be no further action on this until Mr. Ruma is able to secure and give you documents in writing that he has secured a route all the way through to Highland Croy? Again, I'm in favor of killing the plan for many reasons, but if you go forward, that's one extra concern that I would have that I think should be a precondition to anything going forward.
Very good, thank you for your thoughts. Anyone else like to come forward and speak?
My name is Susan Gruber King, and I live at 7015 Tuscany Drive. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous, in Tartan West. And one thing that has not been addressed tonight is the impact that this development and the road to Highland Croy will have on the traffic already on Highland Croy, which is increasing day by day as Jerome Village develops, Tartan Ridge develops, and I don't know what else is out there. I can tell you already, if you're talking about an access road that's going to allow people to cut through developments to get to main streets, what's happened on Tuscany Drive, the speed limit there is 25 miles an hour. And during the mornings, we have a constant flow of traffic coming from Glick Road onto Corazon, turning left on Tuscany, going all the way up to Tuscany Drive, and then turning left onto Highland Croy to get to the high school. And that traffic moves through there at about 45 to 50 miles an hour. And that has, that goes on. day, nights, weekends. The police come out and patrol periodically and hand out tickets, but I can assure you that if you build a connector road to Highland Croy, when that road backs up, they're going to come back around through the development onto Forenza, onto Tuscany, so that they can make a left turn onto Highland Croy and get either to the high school or get up to the freeway, 33 and 161, to go to work. I mean, I think the traffic density numbers, the traffic impact study, I just don't think people have got this right. You've got 240 homes going in there. You figured they're going to be probably families, because that's mostly what we have here in Dublin. You're going to have at least one wage earner, probably two, and you may have a caregiver taking kids to school, or a teenager driving to high school, because even if they can walk, they may want wheels. And I think you're going to have a lot more traffic than what you're anticipating now. And I don't know who is responsible for Highland Croy. All I know is that with all of the development out there already, we haven't seen any or heard anything about widening Highland Croy to accommodate all this additional traffic. We haven't heard anything about lowering the speed limit. We have an association website, and we had several comments just a couple weeks ago from people up north concerned about the speed of the traffic coming out of McKittrick and going down to Highland Croy, and what was being done about it, people trying to make left turns. If the traffic is going 45 miles an hour on Highland Croy towards the high school through that roundabout area, and you've got another street less than a half mile from Tuscany where people are making left turns onto Highland Croy, it just sounds like a nightmare to me.
Very good. Thank you for your thoughts. Anyone else, please come forward, state your name and address into the record.
Thank you. My name is Mike Galliano. I live at 6253 Muirlock Court South. I openly admit to be the least informed person here on any of these topics, though I should be, but here's what I think is fair to ask. If this group is going to decide to deviate from, I think it's 2704, the 50%, the 75 to green space, the 75% within the borders, whatever those particular items are that this gentleman very well articulated, I think it's fair that you identify, yes, we're going to deviate, here's why we're going to deviate, what has changed from 10 years ago or whenever they passed them. Still the same neighborhood, still the same people, we still have the same goals. As I understand it, it's a beautiful neighborhood being planned, but it's repetitious, and somebody sat here some years ago and made the conscious decision, let's not do that in the future and just keep repeating these same houses. We need to have some variance and some deviation and some diversity. So all I would ask is, if you're going to do what I hope you're not going to do, but I get the sense you're going to do, if you would, please, in fairness to the whole process, to articulate why it is today it's any less important to have 50% than it was, why it is today it's any less important to have all the particulars he cited that I don't remember. So that's all I would ask. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments? Anyone else like to make public comment?
Hi, my name is Leslie McLeod, and I live at 8034 Balmoral Court, which is off Avery Road near the Avery Brand intersection. And I had to step out for a minute, so I apologize if this aspect may have been addressed. But I do want to add, first of all, as far as the traffic, I can tell you, we have lived on our street for 13 years, and it has been increasingly hard to exit from our street. Much more so in the last few years. In fact, tonight, even at 6:30, trying to come to this meeting, it was difficult to turn onto Avery Road. It is a nightmare at many times of the rush hour periods of time. I have also seen accidents right in front of me as kids are going to Jerome. So I want to mention first that again, and I agree with Mr. Fathman that even to consider in any way that this would be approved without Highland Croy distinctly spelled out as far as how it is going to be achieved and required to be part of the initial development, if in fact it is approved, which I do not believe it should be. I just can't see any justification on any level. Public safety, the whole character and environment of the area is going to be severely impacted, which it already has been. Another thing I'd like to mention is that I do have one student still at Jerome. One is in college. I've been very active with the school and over the years, and supported many levies that have been passed as the school district has grown. And it is, I guess, good to hear that there is a site potentially being donated for an additional school site. But all of us in here still have to support and then fund the construction and operating levies that are going to be required in order to have the school. So that is another very big consideration here. We already have Jerome over capacity, and as I'm sure you're aware, several of the schools are going to be added to address the current over capacity, and not only Jerome, but other schools. And finally, I do think that in listening to what has been said tonight, it does seem that what the committee's role should be is not to address, which we do appreciate, that the original plan was many, many times over the current zoning density that is allowed by current zoning. And it's appreciated that there's been a lot done to reduce that density, but the standard should be what the current density is. It shouldn't be what is done from the current or the initial plan submitted for development for this particular development. It should be what the current zoning is, and I do believe that any justification for deviating from such a long history of stated intent for that property should be addressed very specifically by this committee before you would approve anything else. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your thoughts.
My name is Greg Wayna. I live at 6157 Avocet Court, and that's in Hawks Nest subdivision, which is on the southeast corner of Brand Road and Avery Road. Many good points were brought up tonight. I think there was definitely some efforts that have been placed on impact studies on various assets of the city. We heard about traffic impact studies, school impact studies. We heard about getting water and sewer. Fire and schools have weighed in on the proposal here. The current layout for that's in front of you right now has a certain amount of green space that is designated there. But my concern of what I see on a daily basis from the Hawks Nest Homeowners Association location is not the green space that is passive, which is what's proposed here, but the really one of the jewels we have in Columbus, which is our active green space. For example, Avery Park. And Avery Park is probably at capacity in terms of what it can withstand right now in terms of activities and what is needed in that park to rejuvenate the green grass after soccer's played on a regular basis there and after ball games are played on a regular basis. And I would suggest that before this proposal goes forward, that an impact study is done on the city's active recreational spaces in addition to the passive spaces here. Because one of the crown jewels we have here is the amount of our active recreation spaces for the city. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else like to share their thoughts? Going once, going twice? No? Okay, very good. At this point in time, we will close it off to the commission comments. As I stated earlier, we do have two commissioners that were not able to be with us this evening. One of them provided their thoughts in way of a memo, so I want to read, these are from Miss Amy Cram. I want to read those into the record, and then we'll start general comments from the balance of the commission. Amy states, I apologize for missing tonight's meeting. I've spent considerable time reviewing the applicant's materials, the planning staff report, the Friends of Dublin report, the position report, and all the residents' correspondence received as of Friday, November 7th. Based on my review, here are my comments. Number one, discrepancy in plans needs corrected, clarified. There are several lot numbers on the tree survey that do not match or align with the lot numbers in the preliminary development plan. For example, on page 6 of 11 of the tree survey, the lots on the south side of Temple Falls Drive are labeled west to east as 230, 240, 241, 242, yet the same lots on page 1 of 2 preliminary development plan identify the lots as 229, 230, 231, and 232. Secondly, on density, the calculation for density should not include the 15 acres of the developer is allotting for the school. Thus, the calculation should be for the remaining 152 acres, not 167 acres, and 240 residents, so 1.58 dwellings per acre. The density must be 1.41 units per acre or less, which is the lowest surrounding density. Open space calculation should be based on the 152 acres and shouldn't include the 15-acre school site, which when developed will no longer be 15 acres of open space. Conservation design principles. I disagree with the planning report regarding the applicability of the conservation design principles. This site is exactly what the conservation design principles are meant to protect. Full compliance with these principles is absolutely appropriate for this site. Conservation design seeks at least 50% open space at 240 units on 152 acres. The 63 acres of open space is insufficient. The open space should be at least 76 acres. The roads and lots need to be adjusted to protect landmark trees and preserve as many trees as possible. This most likely means a significant reduction in the number of lots on the site. 4 trees. Trees are not man-made and should not be treated as golf course additions like cart paths and sand traps. Many of the trees on this parcel existed prior to the creation of the golf course, because I can't imagine that a hardwood tree would grow to be 40-plus inches in diameter on a 40-year-old golf course. The well-maintained trees that have been on the parcel for the last 40 years and longer are ingrained into the landscape and should be considered natural conditions deserving preservation. Protect tree number 899 at all costs. It is a 72-inch chestnut oak in good condition. See comments below regarding Subarea D Preserve L. Protection tree number 216 is a 72-inch swamp oak in fair condition at the rear of lot 112. The lot lines need adjusted and our stream corridor protection zones needs to be extended to include this tree. Protect tree number 171. It is a 54-inch red oak in good condition at the front of lot 132. Excuse me, lots need adjusted or removed to ensure greater tree preservation. For example, lot 139 has landmark oak trees in good condition. Tree number 161, a 36-inch caliper tree, number 162, 28, and tree number 163, 28 inches in caliper. Lot 139 should be removed to protect the trees in circumstances where there is one large landmark tree in a lot. The lot should be positioned or designed to ensure preservation of the tree. For example, lot 98 has a 40-inch silver maple in good condition, tree number 41. The narrow front of lot 48 would certainly result in the removal of this landmark tree. The lot and or the adjacent lots should be adjusted to ensure the tree remains protected, and language should be added to the development text to ensure preservation of these landmark trees. Item 5, the 100-year floodplain. Lots should not lie within the 100-year floodplain. Lot 43, 44, 225, 232, and 239 on the preliminary development plan are completely in the floodplain, and no house can be built on the lot without being in the floodplain and needing flood insurance. These lots should be eliminated. Lots 118, 140, 240, 238, 237, 236, 235, 234, 233, 224 on the preliminary development plan should be adjusted to not be in the floodplain. Elimination of lots, planning's condition number 3, planning recommended removal of lots 43, 240, 144, and 169 to open vistas. I agree with the elimination of these lots, but for a different reason. I agree with the elimination of lots 43, 240, and 144 since they are in the floodplain and have landmark trees. I also agree with the elimination of lot 169 because according to the tree survey, the lot has 26 and 29-inch oak trees in good condition. Tree survey calls the lot 243. Item 7, the 15-acre sub-area D Reserve L. The 15-acre school site should be removed from the development plan calculations. The 72-inch chestnut oak in good condition, tree number 899, needs to be protected. According to the tree survey, the tree lies within Reserve L at the rear of lots 190, 191. If the canopy and thus the roots of the tree 899 extend to lots 190 and 191, then I suggest altering or removing these lots. Tree 899 is the largest tree on the site and needs to be preserved for everyone to enjoy. Language needs to be added to the development text to ensure protection before any construction begins, and protection no matter what becomes of Reserve L. Now, item 8, development text, section 11, architecture. This section is not specific enough. There is too much default to the residential building code. If this property is rezoned, the new zoning must create a development better than what existing zoning provides. There should be percentages associated with permitted and secondary building materials to ensure lots of brick and stone and less stucco. Allowing roof materials like dimensional asphalt shingles should be described as having a specific thickness, quality, warranty, etc. Likewise, the quality of secondary materials such as vinyl should be detailed. The four-sided architecture requirements section needs more detail so that more is required than just continuing a 1-foot-high brick water table around the sides and rear of a house. The text should come with renderings and sample architectural design showing the diversity and high quality that will make these homes as good or better than the surrounding neighborhoods. Section 9, tree preservation removal. I don't agree that evergreen trees are an acceptable replacement tree. Existing evergreens being removed may be replaced with evergreens, but removed deciduous trees should not be replaced with evergreens. I disagree with allowing 30% of the replacement trees to be evergreen, especially since the text allows trees within the Avery Road buffer to count as replacement trees. Preferably, the trees in the Avery Road buffer would not count towards the replacement trees. Additional specific text needs added regarding tree preservation. Specific landmark trees, such as the 3 largest trees on the site, number 899, 216, and 171, need called out in the development text to ensure protection. The conservation design principles need added to the development text to ensure compliance. Traffic study. The public comments and concerns regarding the traffic study need addressed. The numbers need explained and reconciled, and this information needs shared with all. In general, I feel this application needs significant reworking to apply the conservation design principles and justify the rezoning of this parcel. I'm sure there are additional issues concerned I failed to mention above, but I am confident that my fellow commissioners will have plenty to add, and I suspect we will see this application again. If I were present tonight, I would vote no on case 14-068 because a minimum, we got to get through this. Because at a minimum, it fails criteria number 6. The proposal doesn't respect and protect the unique characteristics of the natural features and the natural resources of the site. The roadways and lots should avoid the landmark trees and make all efforts to avoid the good conditioned hardwood trees. The site is unique because these trees have been given room to grow. These trees have well-maintained large canopies that aren't typically found in heavily wooded areas. It fails criteria number 2. The proposed plan is not in conformity with the community plan, which defines the parcel as park open space. If I were to grant a rezoning, the new zoning would at least need to conform to the lowest surrounding residential density. Furthermore, questions remain as to whether or not this development will place an unreasonable burden on the existing street network. It fails criteria number 5. The proposal does not have sufficient open space to meet the objectives of the community plan, which calls for this park open space and conservation design principles, which urge developments to have at least 50% open space. It fails criteria number 13. The proposal doesn't have enough detail to ensure that the building design meets or exceeds the quality of adjacent neighborhoods. So I'd like to thank Ms. Cram for her well-addressed thoughts, and really, it's really a reflection of what this commission tries to do in looking at all of the issues that are presented before us this evening. Now we will hear from the balance of the commissioners and collect their thoughts as well. Would anyone like to begin our time? Not everybody at once? Call names?
I'm happy to do it.
Great, thank you, Ms. Saleh.
Okay, I am not extremely organized. I started out that way, and then as I heard testimony from both the applicant and the residents that are here, I added to my thoughts, and now I've got kind of a mess, but I'm going to attempt to stay on task here. First of all, I guess what strikes me the most from the very beginning of this application being even thought of, or the rumor coming out that, you know, this site might be developed, we began to hear from our residents. And I think that the most important, most sacred trust that is placed in us as planning commissioners and in city council is the fact that we are elected to be the voice of the citizens. You mentioned democracy, and this is how it works at the local level, and you can talk about dysfunction in government, but I really appreciate that everyone came out tonight and that you placed your faith in us to listen to all sides and then make decisions accordingly. I think that we have a very functional government in Dublin, and I'm really proud of this commission and really proud of our city. We are the citizens' representatives, and so we have to, first and foremost, I believe, reflect community sentiment. And with that, I think we heard it this evening, there was one individual that spoke in favor. Most all of the other folks spoke against this development for various reasons. And there is almost universal dislike and mistrust about this proposal. And I think that, part of it, I wasn't aware of all the issues that went on with the project near Brandon, off of Brandon Road. And when I heard that, these trees that we had talked about extensively at City Council, I know that Planning Commission spent a lot of time talking about preserving these trees. And that was sort of, one of the only reasons I supported that development was because I thought we were getting a lot of trees. And then to find out that, a contractor just went out there and hacked down a 110-year-old tree, that's completely unacceptable. And I think that, you earn your reputation in the community, and, with a situation like that.
We'll have full respect here, and everyone's going to have their turn to speak.
Okay, well, all I know is there's trees that are gone that should have been saved. And in any case, I will acknowledge that this developer has done some very beautiful neighborhoods in our community. And he's done some neighborhoods that, are much more traditional and less appealing, I guess, is how I would say. What I've noticed in some of the neighborhoods and what I see happening here, if we don't tighten up the architectural details, is that we're going to have way too much hardy plank. And I think that is, if there are going to be homes built on this site, they need to be primarily brick and stone. And, the other materials would be for trim. And we just need to tighten up that architectural, the architectural descriptions and details a lot more before we would ever be ready to build. I had on my list Tartan Ridge as being an example of a neighborhood that is, when we saw the pictures, when we were rezoning it, and we pictured it in our heads how it's going to turn out, and the renderings were beautiful. You drive through that neighborhood, and it looks like what we saw when we rezoned it. And I appreciated that level of detail when we were approving it, and now that I see it built, I really appreciate that level of detail. And I think with a site like this, we absolutely have to have that level of detail. If we don't, we'll end up with something we might not be as pleased with. Which I guess brings me to thoughts about lots. There are way too many 75-foot lots. I disagree with our citizen group that said they should have a minimum of 85-foot lots. I think the minimum should be 100 feet, absolute minimum. And when you look at some of the neighborhoods in our community that have the 100-foot lots, the houses grow to fit barely on those 100-foot lots. And so you end up with a very claustrophobic feeling in the neighborhood. And I think about this site, and I've driven by it, and I've walked by it, and I've biked by it, and just spent a lot of time in all seasons when I knew that this proposal was coming, thinking about what it needs to look like. And I think that when I look at this plan, it leaves this site completely unrecognizable, and that's very unacceptable to me because of the condition of the trees and the fact that, a lot of times you look at a wood lot and, you really can't see the forest through the trees. You can't see the trees through the forest. But in this site, you can see and appreciate the individual trees and how amazing they are. And I think that that is where we apply conservation design. We need to preserve every single tree on the site. And I started looking at the tree survey and the lot, and I tried to overlay them. And I won't, list all the lots that I could see and the streets needing to go away, but a number of streets need to be rerouted, and at least 70 lots need to be eliminated in order to preserve these individual trees. You can't reproduce a tree. It takes, my neighborhood is 20 years old, and we are just now getting to the point where our trees provide a little bit of shade cover when you're taking a walk on a warm afternoon. It'll take 30 years before we get a canopy that is, truly shade covered. And we look around our city, I look at our immature trees and I think, oh my gosh, this place is going to be amazing in about 50 years when we get the tree growth, because we have so many trees, and it's going to be beautiful. Our children are going to thank us. But for right now, we've got this area with so many beautiful, large specimen trees, landmark trees that we can't possibly get back. And I really like Ms. Goronski's idea about having an individual who reports to the city of Dublin and our city forester charged with protecting the trees, because that, is the only way to ensure that our trees aren't cut down by accident or, however it happens. Once these are damaged, they're damaged forever and they're gone forever. I think we don't need another single-family neighborhood, typical single-family neighborhood, not here, not now. When I look at what's going on with our school district and the growth in this part, and it's not in Dublin, I mean, we in Dublin can do a little bit for our school district in terms of being their land planner and hopefully alleviating the overcrowding that's going to exist and that's going to continue to exist. But when you look at Jerome Village to our north and how fast and how much it's growing and how many school children, I mean, these are big family homes. We all moved to Dublin, we all moved to the area so our children could attend the best school district, in central Ohio. And that neighborhood up there, those neighborhoods are growing, and they are going to burden our school district. And I think that it's our responsibility as Dublin to make sure that we don't contribute to that. As I said, not in this area, not now. Jerome Village is fulfilling our needs for a, traditional single-family neighborhoods upon neighborhood up there. So for me, I guess I'm disappointed in staff's analysis. I find myself agreeing with the citizens' analysis when it comes to the community plan. I sat on city council. I remember very clearly we were debating, we were down to the kind of the last stages of the 2007 edition of the community plan. And we had the folks that own the golf course come forward, and we had talked about, we need to plan that this area will be something else. We need to, it's probably going to develop at some point. And these folks stood up and very stridently insisted that we not put anything on here but parks and open space. It's a golf course, they said, it's a recreational amenity, it should be called out as such. We don't want it touched or mentioned in any way, shape, or form as being anything besides a recreational amenity, open space. And so that's what we did. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very happy with that. And I don't see a compelling reason to go against the community plan. I think that our community is so carefully planned, and we plan with our residents, and we plan with our planners, and we have consultants, and then ultimately developers come forward and, generally speaking, conform to the community plan, and that's why our community's great. And in this case, this doesn't come anywhere close. I understand this land may develop at some point, but I don't think that this is the right development. I can't support this rezoning. I can't even get to the preliminary plat or any of the other stuff subsequent to that because I can't support this rezoning. It goes against the community plan, and in order to vote against the community plan, I have to have a really great reason. I don't think I've ever voted against the community plan, so I'm not going to start with this one. I'm sure that my other fellow commissioners will mention other things, but in the interest of brevity, I'll conclude my comments with that.
Thank you. Zimmerman?
All right. I thank everybody who came out this evening because I've been in that audience for years and I understand what it's like to be out there. And I want to thank staff, Claudia and staff. The report was good. I read through it and a lot of my questions were answered, and I want to thank you for that. A lot of these questions will go to you, Claudia, because I have some questions I need answered. This is just general questions if things do go forward. I wasn't here for the first preliminary, and I am now, but I was on P&Z for 10 years before, so I understand a little bit what goes on here. When they start this project, are all the golf club buildings being removed, and in what time frame is this part of the development? Was this in the phase one?
It is.
Okay.
In the beginning portion of the development text, I think it speaks to that.
Okay. And I'm saying another thing here. One of the other questions I had was the water and sewer system, if there was going to be any burden to anybody else in the city, and that was answered earlier in the evening by engineering. One of the questions I was curious about, because I don't know if I read this somewhere or heard this somewhere, that has there been any drainage issues reported by area homeowners coming from Riviera? Do you have any knowledge of that? Has anybody ever come forward to the city?
I have not, obviously.
Okay.
But I doubt
Mr. Hammersmith is shaking his head no.
No? Okay. That was one of the questions I had. For me, you would have to remove all the home lots from the stream corridor protection zone and or 100-year floodplain and add the lots to the reserves, and staff to determine which lots that would be. Architectural-wise, in a PUD, it's a higher quality materials on the exterior and best use of trim and roof materials, meaning you do better than the appearance code. Condition number 6, when does the applicant, let me see, I wrote down here, when does the applicant give us the detail of the direct site connection to the Highland Croy? When does that come into play? Do we hear that at the final? Do we hear it?
Right, it would be at the final.
Okay, we would know when that connection would come into play.
Not necessarily. The development text states that it would happen prior to phase 5.
Right, but when are they required to tell us where that would, where would we have to know that? Somewhere before we vote on it, I'm assuming, we would know the connection.
Where the connection will be?
Yes.
Yes.
How and when, okay,
Yeah.
how and where, okay. And also on condition number 1, you have the condition on there to include language highlighting the Riviera's proposed near very active high school. I also think you should add in there that it's also add to Gazelle Middle School. I remember the days when there's a lot of activities are done after school there. You're going to have residential backing up to that. And I remember back in the day, even from where I live, we used to have to take our daughter all the way up there for softball, back on that diamond because I was the only one available. And things are getting a little harder to get diamond space over the course of the city. So that also should be added for that area up in there, for those lots. Also, a question I have, on Reserve L for the potential elementary school, on the existing basin, does it need to stay a basin if the school site is built?
If the school were to develop on that piece,
Okay.
there would need to be some stormwater management happening on that site for the
Okay.
school.
Would it have to be as large as this, or would it be large? Something,
It needs
You
to
would
be
likely
studied.
lose the basin entirely, it would probably become a dry basin, because that's typically what the schools have done. They don't want stored water on site for safety
Right,
concerns.
because this is an existing wet basin. I was curious if they'd have to go to the dry, just for safety, right, for the safety. Okay, well, I answered that question. And those are the comments I have. What Ms. Saleh said on the conservation design, I see a lot of those points and what she said, and a lot of things that have been said so far. So for right now, this is my comments, so.
Very good, thank you. Oh, Ms. Newell pressed her button. That must mean you want to be next, huh?
I just figured you were going down the row. I wasn't sure, so I'm happy to speak.
No, me, I like order.
Wait, so, I'll say this before, or I said this before, and I'll say it again. When looking at this site, in my comments, I said I would support zoning for a PUD. When I think in terms of, it gives you the advantage of protecting the land. You spoke very passionately at your informal hearing in regards to this property of how you were going to develop it. And so I have to say I was really surprised when I looked at the plan. I envisioned larger lots because that's what was my takeaway from the presentation that you had given the evening. So I agreed with Ms. Saleh in terms, I think a lot of the lots need to be at least at that 100-foot and the larger lots that you presented. So I was surprised at the number of smaller lots that were in here. There's also a lot of inconsistencies in mistakes and errors as you go through this report, as the sites are misnumbered. The density on the Muirfield development is noted once from staff at being 1.27. It's noted in our report here in the presentation that you gave us tonight at being 1.41. Yet your presentation this evening said it was 1.47. So it leaves me in a great deal of quandary what the true impact of the surrounding zoning is on the other site. I can't support this going above the lowest density of any of the surrounding property. The Muirfield site in particular is the largest body of area that seems to have the lowest zoning development on that. And I spent a lot of time looking at the landmark trees that were on this site. I went through, actually, I tagged all of them that were on the plans back here. So in agreement with Ms. Cram's comments, I think there are several more pieces of property on this site that need to go away just for the sake of the trees that need to be preserved on them, especially when you get to sites 144, 143, 142. There's a very significant grove of trees within those areas. And as I went around the site, there are a number of significant or landmark trees that fall right next to the drive of street. It looks like the tree is attempted to be preserved, but I think there's so much root going to be cut away from those trees. I fear in the end that there are a lot more trees that are going to be lost with the way the site is laid out than the ones I can clearly see are going to be gone with this development as it looks right now. Along the corridor stream with a lot of the trees that are getting preserved, when you read through the tree report, many of them are actually noted as being in poor condition. So in the end, where we're preserving that area and we're representing that we're preserving those trees, I fear a lot of those trees over time are actually going to be lost. A number of them are identified as being green ash, which I think we can all agree are going to be gone in our city in very short order. So that makes the other trees that are on that site even that much more important that it's on here. In terms of the architectural character and the development, I thought the text portion to that site was actually very weak. You had commented and you used Wedgwood as an example of how you would gear and judge the architecture in this site. And you had noted that you used Mr. Apel to have done your architectural reviews. I had the pleasure of working with Bob Apel for 14 years as an employee, so I was very aware of that process that went through them. But you had some very significant architectural standards and guidelines that he judged that the architecture too for Wedgwood that don't exist in this application that's here this evening. I very much think that needs to be developed for me to support rezoning. To rezone this as a PUD for the surrounding residents, I would do that because I feel that you would getting better protection than the current zoning of R or the R1 classification. I don't see that in this development. There isn't enough here that's protecting this property at this moment that's getting me any different than leaving that zoning alone as it is right now. And then the other things that we talked about in terms of the 100-foot property line. When you go through the text, and I was reading the descriptions for each of the parcels. Let me get back here if I can highlight it. Only one of the sub-areas was there any reference to lot coverage, and it was the most dense of our sub-areas, and there was a limitation of 70%. But the other sub-areas placed no limitation of lot coverage on those parcels, which actually concerned me, and all of those things need to go hand in hand in text. And when I was looking, although this is more minute, it's still, it's important to me. I use all of our walkway system around Dublin on a regular basis. It's one of the things that attracted me to the city of Dublin, and it's one of the things that I really think adds to the character of a community. And when I was looking at your site plan and looking at the bike or walking paths, however you want to define them, several of them stop and they're not continuous. So as you're developing this site, I'd like you to take that into account. The walking path that is near behind site 197 and 198, it runs along, does a little loop, stops. You have to turn around and go back. I always think it's much more enjoyable when you can completely just continue walking and have a continual path that circulates throughout the site. So I would make a recommendation that be connected to one of the other sides, whether it connects back to the walk around the retention pond and connects in back north site to or parcel 228, or if it connects through the residences across over to the corridor protection zone. And then I had the same comment in regards to the walking path that terminates behind parcels 174 and 173, that equally have a continuous connection back into the other parcels. Most likely the one that terminates at Forenza Place near parcel 169. That is kind of the brunt of my comments right now. As this stands this evening, I can't support rezoning of this parcel without some of the other ones.
Okay. My audio video guys are telling me that we have limitations on our time, so he is going to be changing it out here for us real quick.
1 minute.
1 minute. Tick tock. Here we go.